28 years old, alone in a hospital room, watching a phone that never rang. That was how Vivian Shaw's first life ended. Betrayed by the best friend whose tuition she had paid, stolen from by the fiancé she had trusted, erased from the company she had built with her own hands. Then she opened her eyes, and she was 19 again. Her bank account held $437. Her laptop had a scratch on the corner from freshman orientation, and her phone was buzzing with a text from the girl who had destroyed her. Viv, I can't afford this semester's tuition. Can you help me? In her previous life, Vivian had said yes. She had given everything, and she had lost everything. This time, she typed a single word. No. She did not know it yet, but that one word would change everything. Her future, her fortune, and the unexpected love of a man who saw through every wall she had built. Welcome to Warm Era. Today's story is about a woman who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is no. No to the friend who uses your kindness. No to the past that tries to repeat itself. And yes to the future you deserve to build. The ceiling was wrong. Vivian Shaw stared at the water stains spreading across the plaster above her bed and knew, with a certainty that made her chest ache, that she was 19 years old again. The last thing she remembered was cold linoleum against her cheek and the sound of footsteps walking away. Jessica's footsteps. Bradley's too. The rhythmic click of dress shoes and the softer scuff of ballet flats. Moving in sync. Moving away from her hospital room. They hadn't looked back. Not once. Her hand moved to her stomach. Flat. No scar from the surgery that had gone wrong. No four-port tape to her wrist. Just smooth skin and a t-shirt she had bought during freshman orientation 4 years ago. 4 years from now. No. In her previous life. She sat up so fast the room spun, and she had to grip the edge of the mattress to keep from falling off. The dorm room was exactly as she remembered it. Maya's bed across from hers. Neatly made with military precision. A stack of biology textbooks on the desk. Spines aligned. The small cactus Maya had named Professor Prickles. Its pot decorated with sticky notes. The window faced the parking lot, where a single streetlight flickered with a rhythm Vivian had once counted to fall asleep. It was dark outside. Late. The clock on her phone said 11:47 p.m. September 12, 2018. Vivian picked up the phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She checked the date 3 times. September 12, 2018. 2 weeks into her sophomore year at Westbrook University. In her previous life, this had been the week everything started. The week Jessica had come to her room, tears streaming down her face, mascara smudged, saying her parents couldn't afford this semester's tuition. Vivian had opened her laptop, transferred the money from her savings, every dollar she had earned from summer freelancing, for $1,300 exactly, and said, "Don't worry, I've got you." Jessica had hugged her so tightly. She had smelled like jasmine perfume and anxiety. "You're the best friend anyone could ask for. I'll pay you back. I promise." She never paid it back. Not the tuition. Not the loyalty. Not the trust. Not even the kindness. Vivian set the phone face down on the nightstand and pressed her palms into her eyes until she saw stars. The memories were flooding back now. Not in order but all at once, like someone had pulled a plug and every moment of the past 9 years was pouring through her skull in a torrent she couldn't stop. The late nights coding her first app. The glow of the screen the only light in this same room. The investors who believed in her, who shook her hand and said she was going to change the world. The company she had built from nothing, sweating through every line of code until it became a multi-million-dollar platform that served 500,000 students. Bradley proposing at the rooftop of the building she had just bought. The city lights spread out below them like a map of everything they would conquer together. The wedding planning. The dress fittings. The smile on Jessica's face as her maid of honor, that beautiful, practiced smile that Vivian had mistaken for happiness. Then the slow unraveling. Jessica taking more responsibility at the company. Jessica spending more time with Bradley in the name of coordinating the wedding. Jessica in his office after hours. Jessica in his car at the company parking lot. Jessica with her hand on his chest at the Christmas party, fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket. And Vivian telling herself she was imagining things. That she was being paranoid. That her best friend wouldn't do that to her. She wasn't imagining anything. By the time she figured it out, it was too late. The patents had been transferred. The board had been swayed. Bradley had filed a restraining order based on lies Jessica had fed him about Vivian's erratic behavior. Jessica had testified, her best friend had testified, that Vivian was unstable, prone to aggressive outbursts, a danger to herself and others. The judge believed her. Why wouldn't he? She looked so sincere on the stand, so concerned, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. Vivian lost the company, the engagement, her savings, her reputation. She was alone in a hospital bed, waiting for a surgery her insurance no longer covered, watching her phone stay silent for days, weeks. She had called Maya once, the only friend who still answered. Maya had flown across the country to sit with her for 3 days before the surgery got cancelled. The ceiling in that hospital room had been white, clean, nothing like the water-stained plaster above her now. She opened her eyes. The tears had come without her permission, hot and thick, running down her cheeks and dripping onto her pillow. She wiped them with the back of her hand and took a breath that shuddered through her entire ribcage. In her previous life, she had been 28 when she died. She had built a company worth $50 million. She had loved 2 people with everything she had, and both of them had used that love like a weapon, sharpened it and turned it against her. In this life, she was 19. She had nothing. $437 in her bank account, a laptop with a deep scratch on the left corner, a mark from the day she had dropped it freshman year. The same laptop she had used to build her first prototype in the past life. The same laptop she would use again. This time, she would not repeat her mistakes. The phone buzzed. A text message. The contact name made her stomach clench with a force that surprised her. Jessica. Vivian stared at the name for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the notification. In her previous life, she had answered this text within 30 seconds. Of course. How much? She hadn't even hesitated. She had trusted Jessica completely. Loved her like a sister, believed that their friendship was the kind that lasted forever. She opened the message. Viv, I'm so sorry to text this late. I don't know how to say this. My parents called. They can't afford this semester. I don't know what to do. I've been crying for an hour. You're the only one I can ask. Please. Vivian read the words 3 times. In her previous life, those same words had made her heart hurt. She had rushed to Jessica's room in her pajamas, hugged her, promised to fix everything. She had worked double the freelance hours that semester, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen for every meal, just to make sure Jessica stayed in school. She had given up her own comfort, her own health, her own future, all for someone who had been planning to destroy her. And Jessica had repaid her by stealing everything. Her company, her fiancé, her future, her life. Vivian's thumbs hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked. Waiting. In her previous life, she had typed, "Don't worry, I'll help. How much do you need?" This life, she typed something else. Her hands were steady now. Her heart was not. It was hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. But she typed the words and pressed send before she could change her mind. No. The response came in seconds. What? Vivian didn't answer. She could already imagine Jessica's face on the other end of that message, the shock, the disbelief, the rapid recalculation. Jessica was not used to being told no. In their entire friendship, Vivian had never refused her anything. She set the phone face down on the nightstand and swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold against her bare feet. The room was dark except for the glow of the streetlight through the window and the faint blue light from her phone as another message arrived. She ignored it. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the campus where her second life would begin. Her laptop was on the desk. She opened it. The screen glowed to life, and she stared at the empty desktop. In her previous life, that desktop had held the first lines of code for an app that would change education. An AI-driven tutoring platform called LearnSync. She had built it from scratch, alone, in this very room, eating cold pizza and drinking stale coffee while the rest of the campus slept. Jessica had stolen it. patented it, launched it under her own name with Bradley's legal help. Vivian had watched the launch from a hospital bed, unable to do anything, because she had no proof and no lawyer and no money left. Vivian opened a new file. Her fingers found the keyboard. The muscle memory was still there, the rhythm of her thoughts flowing through her fingertips, the code arranging itself like a language she had been born speaking. She started typing. Not the full app. Not yet. Just the architecture, the framework, the bones of something new, something better, something Jessica would never be able to steal. She coded through the night. When the sun came up, painting the water stain on the ceiling in shades of gold and gray, she was still typing. Her fingers ached. Her eyes burned. But there was a structure on her screen now, clean and solid, something she could build on. She picked up her phone. 7 unread messages, all from Jessica. Viv, what do you mean no? You're joking. Right. I really need this. I don't have anyone else. Viv, please. I'm begging you. I thought you were my best friend. Fine. Whatever. I'll figure it out on my own. You'll regret this. I hope you know that. Vivian deleted the thread without reading the last one. She knew what it said. She had read a version of it before. In her previous life, when she had finally confronted Jessica about the affair. You made me this way. You were always too good, too perfect, too successful. Someone had to take you down a level. She closed her laptop and stood up. The campus was waking up outside. Students walked past the window, coffee cups in hand, backpacks slung over one shoulder, heading to their first classes. Normal, unaware. She was surrounded by people who had no idea that the girl in the third-floor dorm room had already lived an entire life and died in it. Maya stirred in the bed across the room. Viv. Her voice was groggy. Confused. You okay? You were up all night. I heard you typing at 3 a.m. I'm fine. Vivian's voice came out rougher than she expected, scraped raw by too much crying and too little sleep. Maya sat up, rubbing her eyes with the heels of her hands. She looked at Vivian with the sharp, assessing gaze of someone who had grown up reading people's moods before they spoke. Maya's mother had been a nurse. Maya had learned to diagnose problems by watching faces. Bullshit. You've been crying. Your eyes are red. And you never wake up before 9. I'm fine. Vivian said again. Stronger this time. Maya didn't push. That was one of the reasons Vivian had always liked her. Maya knew when to ask and when to wait. She flopped back onto her pillow. Okay. But if you need to talk, I'm here. Also, someone named Jessica texted me at 2 a.m. asking if I knew what was wrong with you. I told her you were asleep and she should leave you alone. Vivian felt something cold settle in her chest. Jessica had texted Maya. Checking. Monitoring. Already trying to find angles. Gather information. Figure out why her plan wasn't working. In the past life, she had done the same thing, always positioning herself, always gathering intelligence, always 3 steps ahead while Vivian was busy being loyal. Thanks. Vivian pulled on her hoodie, the gray one with the frayed hood strings. I'm going to the library. At 7 a.m. The early bird gets the worm. You're not a morning person. Viv. You're a code until 3 a.m. and wake up at noon person. What's going on? You're scaring me a little. Vivian paused at the door. She looked back at Maya, her real friend, the one who had stayed loyal through everything in the past life. Maya had been the only one who visited her in the hospital. Maya had tried to warn her about Jessica years before the betrayal. But Vivian hadn't listened. She had been too blind, too trusting, too sure that her friendship was unbreakable. I'll tell you soon, Vivian said. I promise. Just give me a few days. She walked out before Maya could ask another question. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that sterile yellow glow that made everyone look tired. She passed the bulletin board and stopped. A flyer caught her eye. The business plan competition. First prize, $50,000 in seed funding. Second prize, $25,000. Applications due October 1st. In her previous life, she hadn't entered. She had seen the flyer, thought about it, but she had been too busy helping Jessica with her tuition, her projects, her life. She had put her own ambitions on hold for someone who never intended to return the favor. This time, she tore the flyer off the board. This time, she would enter. This time, she would win. She folded the paper into her pocket and walked down the stairs, out into the cool September morning. The air smelled like cut grass and coffee and the particular freshness of early autumn. Students were beginning to fill the pathways, dragging themselves to 8 a.m. classes. She kept her head down and walked toward the library, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder, her mind spinning with everything she knew and everything she still had to do. She had been given a second chance. She would not waste it. The library was nearly empty at 7:15 a.m. Vivian chose a table in the corner, far from the windows, where she could see the entrance and no one could see her screen. Old habits from her past life, when she had learned to code in coffee shops because the power in her apartment had been turned off. She had developed a sixth sense for exits, for sightlines, for knowing who was watching. She opened her laptop and stared at the files she had created overnight. The framework was solid. The architecture was clean. She had designed a modular system with 3 core components: a diagnostic engine that assessed a student's knowledge gaps, a dynamic curriculum generator that adapted in real time, and a feedback loop that learned from every interaction. It was elegant, it was ambitious, and it was completely different from LearnSync, the app she had built in her previous life. Jessica would have no way to predict it. The scratch on the corner of her laptop caught her eye. She ran her thumb over it, feeling the rough edge where the plastic had cracked. She remembered the day she had dropped it, freshman orientation, rushing to her first class, her hands full of papers and a coffee cup that was about to betray her. The laptop had hit the concrete with a sound she could still hear. The corner had cracked. She had almost cried, not because of the damage, but because she couldn't afford to replace it. She had taped it and kept using it. In her previous life, that scratch had been invisible to everyone except her. It was a marker of where she had started, broke, desperate, determined. Every time she saw it, she remembered. She pulled up a new document and started writing. Not code. A list. Things I know from my previous life. 1. Jessica will betray me. The form is uncertain. I changed the timeline by refusing the tuition, but the intent is absolute. 2. Bradley Shaw is a lawyer who values status over love. I will not meet him. I will not date him. I will not give him the chance to destroy me. 3. The AI tutoring market explodes in early 2020. I need to launch before the market gets saturated. 4. Professor Eleanor Vance sees potential in me. She will help if I ask. In my previous life, I was too proud to ask. 5. The business plan competition judges include partners from several VC firms. Winning gives me credibility. 6. Cross Capital Holdings is one of the biggest investors in edtech on the East Coast. They funded 3 of my competitors in my past life. The last name made her pause. Cross Capital Holdings. In her previous life, she had tried to pitch to them once, after Jessica had already stolen her company. They had turned her down because her intellectual property was unclear, because Jessica had already filed the patents under her own name. The rejection letter had been polite and final. She deleted the list and opened her code editor. It didn't matter who the investors were. She would build something so good that no one could ignore it. The library door opened. She looked up automatically, then looked back down. The person who walked in was tall, dark-haired, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who owned every space they entered. He carried a leather messenger bag that looked expensive and a black coffee cup with no logo. He wore a simple navy sweater and dark jeans, understated. But the fabric had that particular drape that cheap clothes never achieved. He didn't glance at her. He walked to the far end of the reading room, sat down at a table by the window, and pulled out a stack of papers that looked like financial statements. Vivian watched him for exactly 3 seconds, cataloging details the way she had learned to do in boardroom negotiations. The cut of his jacket, tailored, probably Italian, the watch on his wrist, silver face, brown leather band, understated but worth more than her entire wardrobe. The way he scanned the documents with focused efficiency, turning pages with practiced precision. Then she looked back at her screen. She didn't have time to study strangers. She had a framework to build. She worked for 2 hours straight, barely looking up. The algorithm took shape piece by piece. She was designing a neural network that could identify learning patterns from minimal data. A student could answer 10 questions, and the system would predict their weak areas with 90% accuracy. In her past life, this had taken her 6 months and a team of 3 engineers. Now she was building it alone, from memory, and it was better than the original. At 9:15, her phone buzzed. Jessica again. We need to talk. I'm coming to your room. Vivian typed back. I'm in the library. Don't come. I'm already outside your building. Then you wasted a walk. The response was immediate. Why are you being like this? What did I do? I'm your best friend. Viv. You're scaring me. Vivian set the phone face down on the table. She could feel the anger building, not at Jessica's message, but at herself. In her previous life, she would have been running to Jessica's side right now, apologizing for being distant, promising to fix everything. She would have sacrificed her own work, her own dreams, her own future, to make Jessica feel better. She had done it for years. Not this time. This time, Vivian had deadlines. This time, Vivian had a plan. She went back to coding. The algorithm flowed through her fingers like a language she had been speaking since birth. She was deep in a logic structure, debugging a recursion problem, when a voice interrupted her. Excuse me. She looked up. The dark-haired man from the entrance was standing 2 feet from her table. Up close, she could see his eyes, gray, sharp, assessing. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her screen. His head tilted slightly as he read her code. Your algorithm has a redundant loop in line 47, he said. His voice was calm, matter of fact. It's going to cause a memory leak when you scale. You'll lose about 15% of your processing efficiency. Vivian's first instinct was to close the laptop. Her second instinct was to tell him to mind his own business. But she didn't. She looked at the code, found line 47, and studied it. He was right. It was a lazy shortcut, the kind she would normally catch and review. She had been too tired, running on adrenaline and no sleep. Who are you? She asked, not because she needed his name, but because she wanted to hear how he answered. Ethan Cross. He said it like it should mean something. When she didn't react, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. I'm a business student. I also read code better than most of your CS professors. Self-taught. Good for you. She turned back to her screen. Already fixing the loop. Thanks for the tip. He didn't leave. She could feel him standing there, a solid presence at the edge of her peripheral vision. After a long moment, he said, You're early. Most students don't hit the library until 10. Most students don't have deadlines. What are you building? She hesitated. In her previous life, she had learned the hard way not to share her ideas. Ideas were currency, and Jessica had proven that people would steal them without hesitation. But Ethan Cross had seen her code, had taken the time to point out an error he didn't have to mention. That suggested either genuine curiosity or a very specific kind of manipulation. An adaptive learning engine, she said, AI-driven diagnostics with real-time curriculum adjustment. It identifies knowledge gaps and fills them automatically. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest. For the business plan competition. Maybe. The judges love AI. But they hate incomplete prototypes. You'll need a working demo by the final round in November. First round is just the pitch deck. But if you don't have a demo by the second round, you're out. I know. He studied her for another moment. She could feel his gaze moving across her face like he was reading her the same way he had read her code. Then he reached into his bag, pulled out a business card, and set it on the table next to her laptop. If you need advice on the business side, pitch structure, financial projections, market sizing, call me. You have the technical skills, but the competition is one on storytelling, not just code. Vivian looked at the card. Ethan Cross, Jr., Business Administration, a phone number, an email. No mention of Cross Capital Holdings. No company logo. Just his name and contact information. Why would you help me? You fixed the loop, he said. You mean I helped myself by pointing it out before you knew me? Now you're offering help after knowing me for 2 minutes. That's either extreme generosity or you want something. Which is it? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. It changed his entire expression, made him look younger, less guarded. Maybe I'm just curious about someone who codes at 7 a.m., sleeps in a hoodie with a frayed hood, and doesn't recognize my name. Should I recognize your name? Most people do. He picked up his coffee cup. Think about the card. The application deadline is next Friday. If you want feedback on your pitch. I read financials better than most of the business faculty. He walked back to his table without waiting for a response. Vivian watched him go, tracking his posture, the way he sat down and immediately returned to his papers. He didn't look back at her. She looked at the card again. Ethan Cross. She turned it over. Nothing on the back. Just a name and a phone number. She slid it into her pocket and went back to coding. She had no intention of calling him. She had learned, in her previous life, to trust no one. But she kept the card. At noon, she packed up her laptop. The core algorithm was 60% complete. She had made more progress in 5 hours than she usually made in 2 days. Fear was a powerful motivator. So was rage. So was the memory of a hospital ceiling. She was walking out of the library when her phone rang. Maya, your best friend is in our room, Maya said flatly. She's been crying for an hour. She keeps asking where you are. She asked me if you were seeing someone, if you were on drugs, if you had a breakdown. I told her you were fine and she should stop asking. I'm not coming back until she leaves. Viv, what happened between you two? You were inseparable last week. Now you're treating her like she has a contagious disease. Vivian leaned against the wall outside the library. The sun was warm on her face. She closed her eyes and thought about how to answer. She asked me for money. I said no. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. Maya was quiet for a moment. She's really upset. Viv. She said you texted her no and then ghosted her. She said you've never treated her like this before. She's crying on my bed right now. People change. People don't change overnight. Something happened. You've been different since last night. You look like you've seen a ghost. Vivian opened her eyes. In a way, she had. She had seen her own ghost, the woman she used to be. The one who trusted too much and paid for it with everything she had. The one who died alone while her best friend and her fiancé walked away hand in hand. Maya, I need you to trust me. I can't explain everything right now. But Jessica is not who you think she is. She's not who I thought she was. And I know that sounds crazy, but I need you to believe me. Maya was silent for a long time. Then, okay. I've never seen you this certain about anything. You're always second-guessing yourself. Always giving people the benefit of the doubt. But right now, you sound like you know something I don't. So okay, I'll keep an eye on her. I'll tell her you're not coming back until dinner. But you owe me an explanation eventually. When I can give you one, I will. I promise. She hung up and started walking toward the student center. She needed coffee. She needed to think. And she needed to figure out what Jessica would do next. Because in her previous life, Jessica had never accepted rejection gracefully. She had always found another angle, another person to manipulate, another way to get what she wanted. The answer came faster than she expected. At 2 p.m., Maya texted her, FYI, Jessica just left with a girl from the business school. Blonde, designer bag. I heard her say Cross Capital. Like the investment firm. Vivian stared at the message. Cross Capital. The same firm that owned a significant portion of the university's endowment. The same firm Ethan Cross was clearly connected to, given his name and his tailored jacket and his confident assessment of her code. She pulled his card out of her pocket and looked at it again. Ethan Cross. Cross Capital. Of course. The son of the founder. The heir. The one person who could open doors or close them, depending on whose side he chose. She didn't know yet what Jessica was planning, but she knew one thing for certain. In her previous life, Jessica had moved against her slowly, carefully, over years. She had been patient, strategic, methodical. In this life, the timeline had changed. Vivian's refusal had forced Jessica to act faster, to find allies sooner, to escalate before she was ready. That meant Vivian needed to move faster too. She opened her laptop in the student center, pulled up the competition application page, and started filling in the form. She would submit the first draft tonight. She would refine it over the weekend. But she would not wait. The door of opportunity was opening. This time, she would be the first one through. At 6 p.m., she walked back to the dorm. Jessica was gone. Maya was studying at her desk, headphones on, highlighting a biology textbook. "Your friend left a note," Maya said, pointing to Vivian's pillow with her highlighter. Vivian picked it up. The handwriting was Jessica's, loopy, careful, designed to look harmless and sincere. Pink paper, a heart drawn next to her name. "I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry. I love you. You're my only real friend. Please don't shut me out. I can't lose you. Jess." Vivian crumpled the note and threw it in the trash without reading it again. "I take it that's not a heartfelt apology," Maya said, pulling off her headphones. "It's a manipulation," Vivian said. "She's testing how guilty I feel. The more guilty I act, the more she knows she can control me. She wants me to feel bad, so I'll give her what she asked for." Maya raised an eyebrow. "That's dark, Viv. That's really dark. This is who I am now." Vivian sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and went back to coding. The scratch on the corner caught the light. She ran her finger over it once. A reminder, a promise. In her previous life, she had helped Jessica because she believed in friendship. She had believed that love was enough, that loyalty was rewarded, that people were basically good. In this life, she knew better, and she was ready. 3 days passed since Vivian had sent that single word. No. She didn't answer any of Jessica's messages. There were 23 of them by the third day, ranging from confused to pleading to angry to desperate, cycling through emotions like a slot machine looking for a payout. She turned off her notifications and buried herself in code, sleeping in 2-hour increments between debugging sessions, fueled by cold coffee and the memory of a hospital ceiling. The algorithm was coming together faster than she had expected. The neural network structure was solid. The diagnostic engine was accurate within 93% of her test cases. And the dynamic curriculum generator was beginning to produce results that surprised even her. She had coded through 3 consecutive nights, and what she had built was already better than the first version of LearnSync, the platform she had spent 2 years developing in her previous life. But the silence was costing her. She noticed it on the third day, walking into her 10 a.m. computer science lecture. The room went quiet when she entered, not the normal quiet of a lecture hall settling down. A different quiet, the kind that happened when people had been talking about someone and that person walked in. She kept her face neutral and took her usual seat in the third row. The girl next to her, a business major named Chloe someone, shifted her bag to the other side of the desk. A clear message. Don't sit too close. Don't let her contamination spread. Vivian pulled out her laptop and opened her notes, pretending not to notice. But she noticed. She noticed the whispers starting in the row behind her. She noticed the phone screens angled away when she looked around. She noticed the way her name traveled through the room in fragments. I heard she just cut her off. And apparently she has money. She just refused to help. And that's cold. That's really cold. The lecture was on machine learning optimization. Professor Eleanor Vance was at the front of the room, writing equations on the whiteboard with quick, precise strokes that left trails of white dust in the air. She was in her late 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of posture that made her look taller than she was. She had been a senior engineer at Google before switching to academia, and she didn't suffer fools. In Vivian's previous life, she had taken this same class and aced it. Professor Vance had noticed her, offered her a research assistant position that summer. Vivian had turned it down because Jessica had needed help with something. She couldn't even remember what anymore. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she wouldn't make that mistake again. "Miss Shaw." Vivian looked up. Professor Vance was staring at her from the front of the room. Marker paused mid-stroke. "Yes. You've been staring at your screen for 10 minutes without typing a word. Is there a problem with the material?" "No, Professor. I was just thinking about the gradient descent variant you mentioned in the last lecture. The adaptive learning rate adjustment. Professor Vance's eyebrow lifted slightly. Go on. Vivian took a breath. She hadn't meant to speak, but the words were already forming. Standard gradient descent uses a fixed learning rate, which means it can overshoot the minimum or get stuck in local optima. An adaptive approach adjusts the step size based on the gradient's history, essentially. It learns how to learn. It's more computationally expensive because you're calculating second-order approximations alongside the gradient, but the convergence is significantly more reliable. Atom optimization handles this by keeping an exponentially decaying average of past gradients, which smooths out the update steps. The room was silent. Vivian realized she had just spoken for 45 seconds without stopping, and everyone was staring at her. She closed her mouth. Professor Vance studied her for a long moment. That's correct. And it's not material I've covered yet in this course. Have you been reading ahead? I read some papers over the summer. Which ones? Vivian's mind raced. In her previous life, she had read dozens of papers on adaptive learning algorithms. She picked the most formative one, Kingma and Baugh's paper on atom optimization, 2014. Also the original paper on RMS prop by Thielman and Hinton, and a comparative analysis of adaptive methods by Reuter from 2016. Professor Vance nodded slowly. Something shifted in her expression, recognition, maybe, or curiosity. See me after class, Miss Shaw. Vivian nodded and looked back at her screen. She could feel eyes on her from every direction. Some curious, some hostile. One set of eyes in particular, from the row behind her, felt like needles on the back of her neck. She didn't turn around. She already knew who it was. After class, she waited until the room emptied. Professor Vance was at her desk, organizing papers into a leather folder, and didn't look up when Vivian approached. Close the door, she said. Vivian closed it. The click of the latch was loud in the suddenly quiet room. Professor Vance set down her papers and folded her hands on the desk. You're Vivian Shaw, computer science major, second year. Your GPA last semester was 3.9. The only class you didn't get an A in was your writing seminar. You looked up my transcript. Of course I did. A student who answers a question about atom optimization with a detailed explanation of gradient history smoothing in a sophomore-level lecture is either a genius or someone who memorized a Wikipedia page. I wanted to know which one you were. And you didn't just memorize. You understood the material well enough to apply it to a different context. The way you connected adaptive learning rates to optimization convergence showed genuine comprehension. That's rare. Professor Vance leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking. I have a research project starting next semester, AI-driven educational tools. I need a research assistant who can handle complex algorithm design without constant supervision. The position pays $15 an hour, 20 hours a week. Interested? In her previous life, Vivian had turned this exact offer down. She had been too busy helping Jessica, too busy being a good friend, too busy sacrificing her own opportunities for someone who never deserved them. Yes, Vivian said. I'm interested. Good. I'll send you the paperwork electronically. Professor Vance picked up her pen. One more thing. Miss Shaw, there's a rumor going around that you refused to help a friend with their tuition, that you cut them off without explanation, that you've become cold and distant. Normally, I don't pay attention to student gossip, but I've heard your name mentioned 3 times in the faculty lounge this morning. That means it's reached a level where it could affect your academic standing if it continues. Whatever is happening, be careful. Reputations are fragile things, especially for women in technology. Vivian felt her jaw tighten. I understand. I hope you do. Because the students who succeed in this industry aren't just the ones with the best code. They're the ones who know how to protect their reputation and navigate political waters. Professor Vance looked at her with something that might have been concern. I'm not asking for your side of the story. I'm asking you to be smart about how you handle this. Don't let it consume you. Thank you, Professor. I won't. She walked out of the lecture hall and into the hallway, where she immediately ran into Jessica. The encounter was unavoidable. The hallway was narrow at this end, a bottleneck where students had to pass single file, and Jessica was standing right outside the door, arms crossed. as if she had been waiting. She was wearing a pink cardigan and had clearly been crying. Her eyes were red. Her mascara was smudged at the corners, and her lower lip trembled when she saw Vivian. Viv, please, just 5 minutes. Vivian stepped to the side to go around her. Jessica moved with her, blocking the path. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You owe me that much. I don't owe you anything. Jessica's face crumpled like paper. A passing student glanced at them, then quickly looked away, pretending he hadn't seen anything. How can you say that? We've been friends for a year. I've been there for you through everything. Your grandmother's funeral. Your breakup with. Don't. Vivian's voice came out harder than she intended, sharp enough to cut. Don't stand here and list the things you've done for me, because we both know you're about to use them as leverage to make me feel guilty. Jessica's eyes widened. Leverage. I'm just trying to understand why you hate me all of a sudden. What did I do? Tell me. I'll fix it. I'll do anything. Viv, I'll do anything to make this right. The performance was flawless. The trembling voice, the tear-filled eyes, the desperate sincerity radiating from every gesture. In her previous life, Vivian had fallen for this exact performance 100 times. She had believed every tear, every apology, every promise. Jessica, I'm not going to have this conversation in a hallway. Then where? When? I'll meet you anywhere. Tonight. Tomorrow. Just tell me what I did wrong and I'll fix it. Vivian looked at her. Really looked. She saw the slight tension in Jessica's shoulders that didn't match her pleading tone. The way her eyes flickered to the side when she said, I'll fix it, checking to see if anyone was watching. The calculated slump of her posture, designed to make her look smaller, more vulnerable. In her previous life, Vivian had never noticed these things. She had seen what Jessica wanted her to see. I have class, Vivian said. Excuse me. She walked around Jessica and didn't look back. Behind her, she heard Jessica's voice, loud enough for the remaining students in the hallway to hear, pitched perfectly to Carrie. I don't know what I did to make you hate me, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me. A masterstroke. Vivian could practically hear the students around them piecing together the narrative. Jessica, the poor abandoned friend, begging for forgiveness. Vivian, the cold-hearted monster, walking away without a word. By evening, the story would have spread through 3 social circles. By tomorrow, it would be fact. She kept walking. She had code to write. She didn't have time to fight rumors she couldn't control. At 4 p.m., she was in the student center, nursing a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, when her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. Vivian, this is Ethan Cross. I'm sitting at the table behind you. Don't turn around. Just listen. She froze, her hand hovering over her coffee cup. She didn't turn around. I've been watching the rumor mill. His voice continued, low and even. Your ex-friend has been busy. She's told at least a dozen people that you abandoned her when she was at her lowest. That you're cold and calculating. That you've changed. That you're not the person she thought you were. The story is spreading through the business school and the CS department. By the end of the week, it'll be campus-wide. Vivian set down her phone. Her hand was steady, but something cold was settling in her chest. She had expected Jessica to retaliate. She had not expected Jessica to move this fast. In her previous life, Jessica had been patient, methodical, surgical. This version of Jessica was more desperate, more reckless. That made her more dangerous. She kept her face neutral and picked up her coffee, taking a slow sip. I'm telling you this because I don't like watching someone get run over by a bus they don't see coming. Ethan's message continued. And because I think you're the best programmer I've met at this university. It would be a waste if you spent the next 3 years fighting a reputation war instead of building whatever you're building. Vivian turned the possibilities over in her mind. For Ethan to risk warning her, he had to have heard something concrete, which meant Jessica and Sienna were already coordinating, which meant the attack had multiple fronts. How bad is it? She typed, keeping her eyes on her screen. Bad enough that a professor asked me about it this morning. Bad enough that I heard your name in a conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear. I don't know what you did to make an enemy of Sienna Ross. But Sienna doesn't make small moves. If she's targeting you, it's because someone asked her to, or because you're in her way. Vivian stared at the message. She hadn't done anything to Sienna. She had never even spoken to her. But Jessica had found her, and Sienna had seen an opportunity. Vivian was in the way. That was enough. She typed, "What do you want from this?" His reply came, "Nothing. I don't like bullies. And she's a bully with a pretty face. Also, I'm sitting here because I was about to ask you if you've thought about my offer. The competition deadline is Friday. Your code is good. Your pitch will need work." Vivian turned around. Ethan was sitting 2 tables behind her, his laptop open, a half-empty coffee cup at his elbow. He looked up when she turned and met her eyes without flinching. "What makes you think I need your help?" she asked. He shrugged. "You don't need it. But you'd be smarter to take it." She stared at him for a long moment. In her previous life, she had learned to trust no one. But Ethan Cross had pointed out her coding error without being asked. He had warned her about Jessica's rumor campaign without being prompted. He had offered help without demanding anything in return. That didn't make him trustworthy, but it made him interesting. "Fine," she said. "One meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The library. Same table." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I'll be there." She turned back to her coffee and finished it, cold and bitter. Behind her, she heard the soft click of Ethan packing up his laptop, the quiet zipper of his bag closing. When she turned around again, he was gone. She sat there for a long moment, letting everything settle. Jessica had a head start. Sienna had connections. But Vivian had something they didn't have. She knew how this game ended, because she had already lost it once, and she had no intention of losing again. She pulled out her own laptop and opened her competition application. The pitch section was empty, a blank white page with a blinking cursor. She had been so focused on the code that she had neglected the business side. Starting from scratch on the problem section, she wrote about the students she had seen struggle in her own classes, the ones who fell behind in the first week and never caught up, the ones who were smart but didn't have the right resources, the ones who gave up because the system wasn't built for them. She wrote about the data. 60% of students who fail a course in their first semester never graduate. She wrote about the cost. Billions of dollars in wasted tuition. Millions of shattered dreams. She wrote until the words stopped being words and became a story. A reason for someone to care. She finished the first draft at 2 a.m., saved it, and fell into bed without changing clothes. The meeting happened at 10 a.m. the next day, and Vivian arrived 15 minutes early. Determined to prove she could be professional, she found Ethan already at the table in their usual corner of the library, his laptop open, a neat stack of printed documents beside him. 2 coffee cups sat on the table, one black, one with a splash of milk. He pushed the black one toward her without looking up from his screen. She sat down and wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "You remembered. I noticed things." He pushed the stack of documents toward her. "I pulled the profiles of the competition judges. 3 of them are partners at VC firms that focus on edtech. One is a professor from MIT who specializes in AI ethics. One is the CEO of a publishing company that's transitioning to digital. Your pitch needs to address all 5 of their interests, and you need to do it without sounding like you're pandering." Vivian picked up the first document. It was a detailed profile of a woman named Margaret Chen, partner at Atlas Capital, her investment thesis, her portfolio companies, her publicly stated opinions on edtech trends. Notes were written in the margins in black ink, Ethan's handwriting, precise and economical. "You did all this research," Vivian said. "For me. I did it because I was curious whether your technology could actually win. The research was secondary to satisfying my curiosity. And," he leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking, "I've seen your code. You've built something that could genuinely change how students learn. The adaptive diagnostic engine. The real-time curriculum adjustment, that's not a features list. That's a paradigm shift. But the judges won't care about your code. They'll care about your market size, your unit economics, your go-to-market strategy. They'll care whether you can convince them that you're the person to execute this vision, not just the person who coded it. And you think I can't? I think you haven't tried yet." You've been so focused on making the technology perfect that you forgot to make the story perfect. Technology without a story is just a science project. Technology with a story is a company. He tapped the stack of documents. This is your homework. Read these profiles. Then rewrite your pitch to address each judge's priorities. Then we practice it until you can deliver it in your sleep. You need a sounding board. Someone who will tell you when your argument is weak, when your numbers don't add up, when you're losing the room. I'm volunteering. Vivian studied him. He looked back with those gray eyes. Unblinking. Patient. She searched for the angle, the hidden motive, the catch. There was always a catch. Why are you doing this? I told you. I don't like bullies. That's not a reason to spend hours of your life helping a stranger with a competition pitch. You could be studying, networking, doing whatever business students do. He was quiet for a moment. Then, my father is Harrison Cross, CEO of Cross Capital Holdings. You've probably heard of him. I've heard the name. He's been planning my career since I was born. Business school, then the firm, then the corner office. He's already picked out the board members who will mentor me, the investments I'll oversee, the wife I'll marry. He said it flatly, without self-pity or drama. Last week, he called to tell me that he'd arranged a summer internship for me at Atlas Capital, Margaret Chen's firm. He said it was an opportunity. He meant it was an order. Vivian waited. When I saw you in the library, coding at 7 a.m., wearing a hoodie with frayed strings and a laptop held together with tape and determination, I recognized something. You're building something that's yours. Not your family's. Not your friends'. Not anyone else's. Yours. I wanted to see what that looked like up close, because I've never had anything that was just mine. He met her eyes. That's why I'm helping you. Because I want to know what it feels like to build something that belongs to you, even if it's just by being adjacent to it. The silence stretched between them. Vivian held his gaze, searching for the lie. She had been betrayed by someone who smiled and said all the right things. Ethan Cross was offering help without any visible angle. That should have made her more suspicious. But she didn't find the lie. She found exhaustion in his eyes. The kind that came from fighting a battle you never chose. She recognized it because she saw the same exhaustion in her own reflection every morning. Okay, she said. Let's practice the pitch. They worked for 3 hours straight, barely pausing for water. Ethan tore apart her financial projections and made her rebuild them from scratch. You're being too conservative, he said, crossing out a line of numbers with a decisive stroke. The judges want to see ambition. If your market size is only 300 million, they'll ask why you're not thinking bigger. If it's 3 billion, they'll ask how you plan to capture it. Always start with the bigger number and have a defensible answer ready. He challenged her market assumptions until she could recite the source for every statistic from memory. He drilled her on unit economics, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, churn rate, break-even timeline, gross margin targets. She had built a company before, in her past life, but that knowledge was intuitive, not structured. Ethan made her structure it. Made her understand every number like a chess piece with a specific function. By the second hour, she was exhausted but improving. The pitch had transformed from a rambling explanation of her technology into a tight, structured narrative that moved from problem to solution to market to team to ask. She could see the shape of it now, a story about a student who saw the system failing and decided to fix it. Not because she was a genius, because she had been that student. Your weak point is the transition between the problem statement and your solution, Ethan said, making a note in the margin of her printed deck. You rush. You're so excited about the technology that you skip over the pain point. The judges need to feel the problem before you show them the answer. They need to remember what it felt like to be a student who was failing and didn't know why. If they feel that, they'll believe in your solution. If they don't, your algorithm is just code on a screen. Then he made her practice the pitch out loud. 4 times. Each time, he recorded it on his phone and played it back, pointing out every hesitation, every filler word, every moment where her voice lost confidence. You say when you're about to pivot to a new point, he noted, circling a moment on the transcript he had typed. It sounds like you're making it up as you go. Cut the and replace it with a breath. Silence sounds like confidence. Sounds like uncertainty and makes the listener doubt you. By the third hour, she had a pitch deck she was proud of. Her voice was hoarse from repeating it, but the structure was solid. The numbers were defensible, and she could deliver it without notes. Submit your application by Friday, Ethan said, closing his laptop. The first round is just the written pitch and your team bios. You don't need a team to apply, individuals are allowed. But if you make it to the second round, you'll want to have one assembled. I don't have a team. Then start looking. He stood up, sliding his laptop into his bag. I know a few people who might be interested. CS majors who are tired of building other people's products for other people's credit. I'll send you their contact information. Ethan. He paused. Why does your father want you to intern at Atlas Capital specifically? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, because Margaret Chin has a daughter. Her name is Sienna Ross. And Sienna is the wife my father picked for me. He walked away before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the library's marble corridor. Vivian sat alone at the table. The stack of documents spread out in front of her like a puzzle she was still learning to solve. Her coffee had gone cold again. Sienna Ross. The blonde business student Maya had seen Jessica leaving with. The one who mentioned Cross Capital. The one whose mother ran the firm where Ethan's father wanted him to work. The pieces were falling into place faster than she had expected. Jessica had found an ally in Sienna, who wanted to marry into Cross Capital. And Ethan was caught in the middle, pushed toward a woman he hadn't chosen, helping a woman he barely knew. She packed up her laptop. She had a pitch to perfect and a competition to win. That evening, she was back in her dorm room, coding, when Maya came back from dinner with a grim expression. Your friend is getting worse, Maya said, dropping her backpack on the bed with a thud. She was in the dining hall crying, loudly, telling everyone who would listen how you abandoned her, how you were her only hope and you turned your back on her. Half the people there looked ready to form a lynch mob. I know. And there's a girl from the business school who's been following her around like a shadow. Blonde. Wears a lot of designer stuff. I'm talking bags that cost more than our semester rent. I heard her telling people that you're not what you seem. Whatever that means. Sienna Ross. Maya blinked. You know her. Not personally. But I know who she is. Vivian kept typing, her eyes on the screen. She's the daughter of a VC partner. She wants to marry Ethan Cross. And she's using Jessica to get to me. Probably because Jessica told her I'm close to Ethan and she sees me as a threat. Maya sat down on her bed, staring at Vivian with an expression that was half confusion and half concern. How do you know all of this? You've been in this room for 3 days. You haven't talked to anyone except me. I've been paying attention. That's not an answer. Vivian stopped typing. She turned to face Maya, her hands folded in her lap, and took a slow breath. She had been carrying the secret for 4 days, and it was eating her from the inside. Maya was the only person who had never betrayed her. She deserved the truth, or at least a version of it. Maya, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to just listen without interrupting. Maya nodded, her expression wary. I know how this sounds. I know it sounds crazy, but I remember things I shouldn't be able to remember. Things that haven't happened yet. Things that happened in a different version of my life. A version I already lived. She took a breath. In that version, I helped Jessica with her tuition. I paid for all 4 years. I gave her everything I had. And she repaid me by stealing my company. Stealing the man I was going to marry. And leaving me to die alone in a hospital room. The room was silent. Maya stared at her, mouth slightly open. I know it sounds insane. I know you think I've lost my mind. But that's why I said no to her. That's why I've been different. Because I already lived through her betrayal once. And I'm not going to let it happen again. Maya was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Bradley. That's the name you said when you were talking in your sleep last night. Vivian felt a chill run down her spine. I was talking in my sleep. Kept saying don't trust her and Bradley. No. I thought you were having a nightmare. Maya's voice was careful. Like she was handling something fragile. Viv, do you really believe this? That you somehow lived another life and came back? I know it sounds impossible. It sounds impossible because it should be impossible. Maya stood up and walked over to Vivian's desk. She crouched down so they were at eye level. But I've known you for a year. You've never lied to me. You've never exaggerated or made up stories. And right now, you look more scared than I've ever seen you. So I'm going to believe you. Not because I understand it. Because I trust you. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this is real and Jessica is really that dangerous, then we need a plan. Maya pulled out her phone. I took a picture of something today. Jessica left her notebook open in the dining hall when she went to get more food. I didn't read through it, but I saw a name, Sienna Ross. And a meeting time, 8 p.m. tonight, at the business school building. Vivian looked at Maya's phone screen. The photo showed a page of Jessica's notebook, written in her familiar loopy handwriting. Sienna, 8 p.m., BSB room 204, be ready. Be ready for what? Maya said. I don't know. But I think we should find out. They arrived at the business school building at 7:50 p.m. The building was mostly empty at this hour. The fluorescent lights dimmed to their nighttime setting. The hallways quiet except for the distant hum of a janitor's vacuum. Room 204 was on the second floor, at the end of a long corridor. The door was closed, but light showed through the frosted glass panel, a warm rectangle in the dim hallway. Vivian and Maya found a spot in an empty classroom across the hall, leaving the door cracked just enough to see through. They waited in silence, their breathing shallow. At 8 p.m. sharp, a figure in a pink cardigan walked down the hallway. Jessica. Her footsteps were quick, purposeful. She knocked on room 204's door, and it opened instantly. Sienna Ross stood in the doorway, blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a cream-colored blazer over a silk blouse. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. Right on time. Sienna said, "Come in." Jessica stepped inside. The door clicked shut. Vivian's heart was pounding against her ribs. She looked at Maya, who was already pulling out her phone, setting it to record audio. "We need to get closer," Maya whispered. "We can't. They'll see us." Then we wait. They waited. 45 minutes that felt like hours. At 8:47, the door opened, and Jessica came out. She was smiling, not the fragile, tearful smile she wore in public. A real smile, sharp and satisfied. The smile of someone who had just gotten exactly what they wanted. Sienna appeared behind her in the doorway. "Remember, Friday. The submission deadline is at 5 p.m. Make sure she doesn't meet it." "I will," Jessica said. "Don't worry." They parted ways. Sienna walked toward the stairs, her heels clicking on the linoleum. Jessica walked back down the hallway, passing within 3 feet of the classroom where Vivian and Maya were hiding. Vivian held her breath. Jessica's smile was still in place as she disappeared around the corner. When the hallway was empty, Maya let out a long breath. "Okay, that was terrifying, and also very useful. She's going to try to stop you from submitting your application on Friday. Friday at 5 p.m. Vivian said. "The deadline. Then we make sure she can't." "What's the plan?" Vivian pulled out her phone and opened the message thread with Ethan. She typed, "I need to submit my application early. Can we meet tomorrow morning?" His reply came within seconds. 6 a.m. Library. "I'll bring coffee." The email arrived at 7:32 a.m. on Friday, 3 hours after Vivian had submitted her application and 62 hours after she had watched Jessica and Sienna plan to stop her. She was in the library with Ethan, going over the final version of her executive summary and checking every line for errors, when her phone buzzed with the notification. "Congratulations! Your application for the Westbrook Business Plan competition has been received and is under review. Round 1 results will be announced October 5th. She stared at the screen. The words blurred for a moment, then sharpened. She had done it. She had submitted before the deadline. Before Jessica could interfere. Before Sienna's plan had a chance to take effect. The early submission meant the system had logged her entry at 4:17 a.m. Nearly 13 hours before the 5 p.m. cutoff. "You're in," Ethan said, reading over her shoulder. His voice was calm, but there was something in it, relief, maybe, or satisfaction. "I submitted 3 hours ago. That's a confirmation, not an acceptance." They could still reject me in the first round. They could, but they won't. I've seen your application. The algorithm section alone is stronger than half the submissions the judges will receive. The pitch is solid. The financials are conservative enough to be believable but ambitious enough to be interesting. He leaned back in his chair. You're going to make it to the second round. Vivian closed her email and looked at him. The library was quiet, the early morning light filtering through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the reading tables. She had been asking herself the same question for days, and she was tired of not having an answer. When are you going to tell me why you're really helping me? I already told you. You told me a reason. That doesn't mean it's the real one. He leaned back in his chair, studying her the same way she studied him. Those gray eyes. Unblinking. Assessing. What do you think my real reason is? I think you're using me as a distraction from your father. I think helping me is the first thing you've done that he didn't approve of. And that feels good because it's yours. I think you're curious about whether someone like me can actually succeed without family connections. Because if I can, it means you might be able to escape your own cage too. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. That's 3 reasons. Are any of them wrong? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, no, but none of them are the whole truth either. He stood up, sliding his laptop into his leather bag with practiced efficiency. I have a class in 20 minutes. I'll text you the contact information for those CS majors I mentioned. Marcus Reed, Priya Khatri, Daniel Osei. You should meet them before the second round. If you make it through, you'll need a team. Ethan. He paused, his hand on the strap of his bag. Thank you. For the help. For the warning about Jessica. For not treating me like I'm crazy when I told you I was building an AI engine in my dorm room. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. It hovered somewhere between amusement and something deeper. Something she didn't have a name for yet. You're not crazy, Vivian. You're the sanest person I've met at this university. The problem is that everyone else here is playing pretend. They're playing at being serious students, serious entrepreneurs, serious adults. You're not playing. That scares them. He walked away before she could respond, his footsteps echoing through the quiet library. She watched him go, then looked back at her confirmation email, reading the words one more time. She had made the first move. Now she had to figure out the next 1,000. That afternoon, Vivian found a package waiting for her at the dormitory front desk. A plain manila envelope with her name typed on the front. No return address. No stamps. It had been hand-delivered, slipped into the mailbox slot by someone who didn't want to be identified. She opened it in her room. Alone. The door locked. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Legal documents. Her grandmother's name was at the top of every page in formal typeface. The Sterling Family Trust. Vivian sat down on her bed. The papers spread out around her in a semicircle. Her hands were shaking, but she wasn't sure if it was from excitement or fear. She had known about the trust in her previous life. Her grandmother had mentioned it once, in a letter Vivian had found after the funeral, but she had never followed up. She had been too busy with Jessica's problems, with Bradley's demands, with building a company that would eventually be stolen from her. The trust had sat there, untouched and unknown, for 8 years while Vivian struggled and scraped and lost everything. The papers were dated 8 years ago. Her grandmother had signed them 3 months before she died. Her signature slightly unsteady from age but still clear and deliberate. Eleanor Sterling had known she was running out of time, and she had used what she had left to protect her granddaughter. The trust held $400,000, available to Vivian upon her 21st birthday, or earlier if she could demonstrate a viable business plan endorsed by a faculty advisor. The conditions were specific but not impossible. Her grandmother had designed them to be achievable for someone who was willing to work for it. A viable business plan, endorsed by a faculty advisor. Vivian looked at the name on the advisor line. Professor Eleanor Vance. She had never made the connection. Professor Vance and her grandmother shared the same first name, Eleanor. She had always thought it was a coincidence, a common name for women of that generation. But now, looking at the documents, she wondered. The trust had been set up by Eleanor Sterling, and it required an Eleanor to approve its release. That was not a coincidence. That was a deliberate design. She picked up her phone and called the number on the documents. A lawyer's office answered on the second ring. Good afternoon, Sterling and Associates. How may I help you? My name is Vivian Shaw. I'm calling about the Sterling Family Trust. One moment. Ms. Shaw. The line clicked, and soft hold music played for a few seconds. Then a new voice came on, deeper, older, with the careful cadence of someone who had spent decades choosing their words. Ms. Shaw. We've been expecting your call. Who am I speaking with? Thomas Sterling. I'm your grandmother's attorney, and, as it happens, your uncle. Vivian's hand tightened on the phone. Uncle. She had never met him. She had never even heard his name. Her grandmother had been her last living relative on her mother's side, or so she had believed. I didn't know I had an uncle. I'm not surprised. Your mother and I had a falling out before she passed. The details aren't important now. But Eleanor made me promise to keep the trust ready for you. She said you would need it one day, and she was rarely wrong about such things. His voice was measured, careful, like someone who had been holding a secret for a long time. I've been sending letters to your university address for 2 years. You never responded. I never received them. Someone may have intercepted them. The last one was sent 8 months ago. Certified mail with a return receipt requested. Have you had any mail issues? Anything missing or delayed? Vivian thought about the pile of mail Maya had been bringing up from the dormitory office. Bills, flyers, university notices, the occasional catalog. She had never thought to check if anything was missing. She had trusted the system. I'll look into it. Please do. The trust requires your signature on a few documents before we can release any funds. But I should warn you, Ms. Shaw, there may be someone trying to prevent you from accessing it. The letters I sent were not lost by accident. Who? I don't know. But your grandmother anticipated trouble. She left instructions that if you ever called, I was to give you a message. She said, trust no one, not even the ones who smile. Vivian felt a chill run down her spine, cold and electric. Those were her grandmother's exact words, spoken to her when she was 12 years old, sitting on the edge of Eleanor's bed in the nursing home. It was the last time she had seen Eleanor alive. She had never told anyone about that conversation. Not her mother. Not Jessica. Not a single soul. I understand, Vivian said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was hammering. When can I sign the documents? Monday morning. My office is at 47, Sterling Place. I'll have everything ready for you. Bring identification and proof of enrollment. She hung up and sat in the silence of her dorm room. The legal documents spread around her like a map of a future she hadn't known existed. $400,000. A trust her grandmother had set up years before she died, anticipating that Vivian would need it, preparing for a moment Vivian had never known was coming. She thought about the letters that had never arrived. Someone had been intercepting them. Someone who knew about the trust and wanted to keep Vivian from accessing it. Someone who had been planning for years. In her previous life, she had never discovered the trust. She had been too busy helping Jessica, too focused on her company, too blind to see that there were resources available to her that she had never accessed. She had died without knowing that her grandmother had left her a way out, a safety net, a second chance. This time, she would use it. She sat in the dark for a long time, letting the reality sink in. $400,000. That meant she could hire the best lawyer in the state if she needed one. She could pay for server infrastructure that would scale to 1 million users. She could offer competitive salaries to the team she was building. She could compete on a level playing field with companies that had millions in VC backing. And Jessica had known about this for 2 years. She had known that Vivian had access to resources that could change her life. And she had kept it secret. Every time Vivian had struggled to pay for textbooks. Every time she had worked extra shifts at the library for spending money. Every time she had worried about her future, Jessica had known there was a trust fund waiting for her. And she had said nothing. The anger that rose in Vivian's chest was cold and sharp. Not the hot rage of betrayal she had felt when she woke up in this life. A different kind of anger. The kind that came from understanding that Jessica's betrayal wasn't a single event, it was a pattern. A way of being. A fundamental choice to take advantage of someone who trusted her. She folded the documents carefully and placed them in her desk drawer, locked the key around her neck. Then she picked up her phone and called the number of her grandmother's lawyer. Thomas Sterling answered on the second ring. "Ms. Shaw, I was wondering when you would call back. I have questions about the trust, about my grandmother, about who else knows about this." There was a pause. Then, "Your grandmother anticipated you would ask. She left a letter for you. I've been holding it for 8 years, waiting for the right moment to deliver it." Vivian's breath caught. A letter. She wrote it 3 days before she died. "She sealed it and instructed me to give it to you when you first accessed the trust. I'll bring it on Monday, along with the signing documents." Vivian didn't sleep well that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what her grandmother had written. Eleanor Sterling had been the only person in her family who had ever believed in her. She had seen something in young Vivian that no one else had, not her mother, not her teachers, not her friends, and she had left a letter, waiting for 8 years, for the moment Vivian finally found her way to it. That evening, Maya came back to find Vivian still at her desk. The legal documents spread out in neat rows. "What's all this?" "My grandmother's trust fund." Vivian looked up. $400,000. "Available if I can get Professor Vance to endorse my business plan." Maya's eyes widened. The biology textbook in her hand slipped and she caught it against her chest. I know. That changes everything. You could hire a team. You could build the app full-time. You could pay for servers, marketing, legal fees. It also makes me a target." Vivian folded the documents carefully and put them back in the envelope. She had been thinking about this all afternoon. "Jessica has been intercepting my mail. The lawyer told me. Letters about the trust have been going missing for 2 years. Maya's face went pale. She set down her textbook and sat on her bed, her knees pulled up. "She's been stealing your mail. Since freshman year. Since freshman year. She knew about the trust. She knew I had access to money. And she never told me. She kept it hidden so I would stay dependent on her. So I would keep giving her what she needed." Vivian stood up, the envelope tucked under her arm. "Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with Professor Vance. I'm going to ask her to endorse my business plan. And then I'm going to sign the trust documents on Monday. And Jessica." Vivian looked at the window. Outside, the campus was dark, the streetlights casting pools of yellow light on the empty pathways. Somewhere out there, Jessica was with Sienna, planning their next move. But Vivian had something they didn't know about, something they couldn't take away. Jessica is about to find out that she's not the only one who's been keeping secrets. The meeting with Professor Vance was scheduled for Saturday at 2 p.m. in her office. Vivian arrived with her competition application printed in triplicate, a flash drive with her working prototype, and a folder of documents her uncle's office had emailed her that morning. She had dressed in her best clothes, a navy blazer she had bought at a thrift store, a white blouse, dark jeans that didn't have any holes. She wanted to look serious, capable, like someone who deserved $400,000. Professor Vance's office was on the 3rd floor of the engineering building, a small room with windows that faced the campus quad. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with textbooks and conference proceedings and the occasional framed photograph of graduation ceremonies and research conferences. Professor Vance was at her desk when Vivian knocked, reading something on her screen with her reading glasses perched low on her nose. "Come in, Miss Shaw." "Close the door." Vivian sat down in the chair across from the desk. It was uncomfortable, deliberately so, a wooden chair with no padding, designed to keep meetings short. She placed the folder on the edge of the desk and waited. "I received your application," Professor Vance said, turning away from her screen. She removed her glasses and set them on the desk. "The algorithm is impressive. The market analysis is solid. The pitch structure is surprisingly well structured for a student who hasn't taken any business courses. I had help. Ethan Cross." Vivian didn't bother denying it. There was no point. Professor Vance knew everything that happened on this campus. He's been coaching me on the business side, the financial projections, the market sizing, the pitch structure. I did the code. He did the numbers. Professor Vance nodded slowly, her expression neutral. "Ethan is one of the brightest students in the business school. He's also the son of Harrison Cross, which means his help comes with complications that extend beyond this competition. Do you understand what those complications are? His father wants him to marry Sienna Ross to unite two business empires. Sienna is allied with Jessica Chen, who wants to destroy me because I refuse to enable her. By helping me, Ethan is creating a direct conflict with his family's plans. That's a reasonably accurate assessment. Professor Vance leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking. And you're okay with that? With being the reason Ethan Cross goes to war with his father over a competition? I'm not the reason. Ethan made his own choice. I just happened to be the person he chose to help. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not going to refuse it either. Professor Vance studied her for a long moment, her gaze sharp and assessing. Then she said, "You remind me of someone I used to know, a woman who was brilliant, determined, and completely unwilling to ask for help. She died young, and the world lost something irreplaceable when she did." Vivian's breath caught. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Professor, did you know my grandmother?" Professor Vance's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a softening, a recognition. "Eleanor Sterling was my mentor. She was the reason I went into engineering. I was her student at MIT, 40 years ago. She saw something in me that no one else did, and she pushed me to be better than I thought I could be." She paused. "She also told me, before she died, that her granddaughter was going to be someone extraordinary. She made me promise that if you ever came to me for help, I would give it, no questions asked." Vivian felt a lump form in her throat, hot and thick. She swallowed it down. "She left me a trust fund, $400,000. But I need a faculty advisor to endorse my business plan before I can access it." "I know. The documents were copied to my office when the trust was established. I've been waiting for you to ask for the past 2 years. Then you'll do it." Professor Vance pulled open a drawer and took out a pen. It was an old fountain pen, silver and black, the nib worn from decades of use. She uncapped it, signed the endorsement line on the document Vivian had brought with a smooth, practiced stroke, and pushed it back across the desk. "The trust also requires that I serve as your advisor for the duration of the project. That means weekly meetings every Friday at 4 p.m., written progress reports every 2 weeks, and a final presentation at the end of the academic year. Are you prepared for that level of commitment?" "Yes, Professor." "Good." Professor Vance capped the pen and set it aside, aligning it with the edge of her desk. "One more thing. The trust has been a target for some time. Your grandmother anticipated that people would try to prevent you from accessing it. She set up multiple layers of protection. I am one of them. Someone's been intercepting my mail. The lawyer told me letters from his office have been going missing for 2 years. I know. I sent some of those letters myself, forwarding documents your grandmother wanted you to have." Professor Vance's voice was flat, clinical. "They were returned to me marked undeliverable, addressee unknown. I knew that wasn't true. You were registered at this university, living in a dormitory with a functioning mail system, but I couldn't prove who was intercepting them. Do you know now? Jessica Chen, my former best friend." "Then you have a problem. Because Jessica Chen is currently sitting in the student center, meeting with Sienna Ross for the 3rd time this week. And Sienna Ross has access to legal and financial resources that could make your life very difficult if they decide to escalate." Vivian felt her jaw tighten. "I know. I saw them." "Then you also know that the competition is just the beginning. If you win, you'll have $50,000 in seed funding and the attention of every VC in the region. If you lose, you still have the trust fund, but you'll have lost the momentum and the credibility. Either way, the fight doesn't end on stage. It continues until one of you walks away." "I understand." Professor Vance looked at her for a long moment, her eyes searching Vivian's face. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, barely a curve of her lips, but it was real. "Your grandmother would be proud of you, Vivian. She always said you had iron in your spine. Now go build something worth building." Vivian walked out of the office with the signed document in her hand. The paper was warm from being held, the ink still slightly wet where Professor Vance's signature crossed the line. She had done it. The trust was within reach. The competition was underway. The plan was in motion. But as she walked across the quad, the autumn sun warm on her face. She saw them, Jessica and Sienna, sitting at a table outside the student center, coffee cups in front of them, heads bent together in conversation. Jessica was laughing at something, that light, musical laugh that had once made Vivian feel like they were sisters. Sienna was nodding, her expression focused, her phone in her hand. Vivian didn't slow down. She didn't look away. She kept walking, the signed document pressed against her chest, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory like a prayer. Trust no one, not even the ones who smile. She made it back to her dorm room without incident. Maya was there, sitting cross-legged on her bed, a biology textbook open in her lap and a highlighter in her hand. How'd it go? Maya asked. She signed it. Vivian held up the document. I'm in. The trust is mine. That's amazing. Maya closed her textbook and stood up, grinning. This is it, Viv. This is really happening. You have funding. You have an advisor. You have a prototype. Jessica and Sienna were meeting at the student center just now. I saw them on my way back. Vivian set the document on her desk, carefully smoothing out the edges. They're planning something. Of course they are. But you have Professor Vance on your side now. And you have Ethan. And you have me. Maya crossed the room and put her hand on Vivian's shoulder. That's a better team than anything they've got. Vivian looked at Maya, her roommate, her real friend, the one person who had believed her without demanding evidence. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me. Just win. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She was lying in bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, when her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I heard you got Professor Vance to sign. The whole business school is talking about it. Vivian typed back. How did they find out? Professor Vance called my father. She told him she'd just endorsed a business plan from a student with extraordinary potential and that he should pay attention. My father called me to ask if I knew who you were. What did you tell him? I told him you were the best programmer I'd ever met and that he should invest in your company. And he laughed. He said, son, real businesses aren't built by girls in dorm rooms with second-hand laptops. I told him he was wrong. He hung up. Vivian read the message twice, her jaw tight. Harrison Cross didn't know her. He had never seen her code. He had dismissed her because of her laptop, her dorm room, her gender. She was a girl with a scratched laptop, so she couldn't possibly build a real business. Your father is wrong. She typed. I know. And when I win the competition, I'm going to send him a copy of the winner's check. A long pause. Then, I'm looking forward to it. She smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in days, and it felt strange on her face, like a muscle she had forgotten how to use. The next week was a blur of activity. Vivian met with the CS students Ethan had recommended, one by one. In the library. Over coffee. In empty classrooms. Marcus Reed, a senior who specialized in UX design, had a portfolio of beautiful interfaces and a quiet intensity that Vivian recognized. Priya Khatri, a junior who was a machine learning prodigy, asked questions about the neural network architecture that took Vivian an hour to answer. Daniel Osei, a graduate student who had built 3 startups before dropping out of the PhD program, examined her financial projections like a prosecutor looking for lies. She showed them her prototype, walked them through her vision, and watched their faces shift from polite interest to genuine excitement. Marcus signed on first. I've been looking for a project like this for 2 years. The educational tools on the market are garbage. Yours isn't just better, it's a completely different category. Priya signed on next. The neural network architecture is elegant. I can optimize it by about 40% if you give me 2 weeks and access to the GPU cluster in the engineering building. Daniel took the longest. He asked 100 questions about the business model, the competition landscape, the intellectual property protection, the exit strategy. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're going to need a COO. Someone who can handle operations and strategy while you focus on the product. That's me. If you'll have me." By Friday, Vivian had a team. By Saturday, they had their first formal meeting in the library, mapping out the development timeline for the second round of the competition. By Sunday, Vivian had deposited her first trust fund withdrawal and opened a business bank account with $40,000 in working capital. She was building something. Not the same thing she had built in her previous life, something better. Something new. Something that belonged entirely to her. And Jessica had no idea. Maya reported that Jessica had been acting strangely all week. She had stopped crying in public. She had stopped talking about Vivian altogether, refusing to answer when people asked what had happened between them. Instead, she was spending all her time with Sienna. The two of them huddled in corners of the business school building, their conversations too quiet to overhear. "She's planning something," Maya said, coming back from the dining hall with a report. "I saw them again today. They were looking at something on Sienna's phone." Jessica looked nervous. Let her plan. Vivian was at her desk, coding. The prototype was coming together faster than she had expected. Marcus had redesigned the interface with a clean, modern aesthetic. Priya had optimized the neural network by 38%. Daniel had built a financial model that projected profitability within 18 months. "Whatever she's planning, I'll be ready." "How can you be so calm?" Vivian looked at the scratch on her laptop, the mark that reminded her of where she had started and how far she had come. "Because I've already lived through the worst thing she can do to me, and I survived. This time, I'm not just surviving, I'm building." Maya didn't ask what that meant. She just nodded and went back to her studying. The water stain on the ceiling caught Vivian's eye. It had grown larger over the past week, spreading like a map of uncharted territory. She looked at it and thought about her grandmother, about the trust fund, about Professor Vance's promise and Ethan's quiet support. In her previous life, she had died believing she was alone. In this life, she was discovering that she had never been alone at all. Her grandmother had planned for her future from beyond the grave. Professor Vance had been waiting for 2 years to help her. Ethan had chosen her side against his own family. She was not the same woman who had died in a hospital room. She was someone new, someone stronger, and she was just getting started. The day of the first round judging arrived faster than Vivian expected. October 5th came like a held breath, the kind you took before diving into water too deep to see the bottom. The autumn air was crisp and cold, the leaves on the quad turning shades of orange and red that looked painted on. She had been running on 4 hours of sleep for 2 weeks, fueled by coffee and the fear that at any moment, everything could fall apart. There was no room for error, no room for hesitation. Every line of code, every number in her financial model, every word of her pitch had been reviewed and revised until it was as close to perfect as she could make it. Her team had gathered in the library that morning, the same corner table where Vivian had first met Ethan a month ago. Marcus was refreshing the prototype's UI for the 100th time, adjusting margins that were already perfectly aligned. Priya was running final diagnostic tests on the neural network, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Daniel was reviewing their pitch deck, marking notes in the margins with a red pen, crossing out words and replacing them with sharper alternatives. Vivian stood at the head of the table, her laptop open, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. She looked at her team, 3 people who had believed in her vision enough to stake their reputations on it. "The judging panel will have 10 minutes to review our written submission before we present," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Then we have 15 minutes for the live pitch, followed by 10 minutes of candid. The judges are looking for 3 things: innovation, feasibility, and team capability. We have all 3. We've tested the prototype on 40 students. We have a 93% satisfaction rate. Our financials are solid. Our IP is protected. We walk in there like we already own the room." Jessica submitted an application too, Daniel said, not looking up from his notes. "I checked the competitor list this morning. She's entered under Sienna Ross's name, with Sienna listed as the team lead and Jessica as technical advisor." Vivian had expected this, but hearing it confirmed sent a cold wave through her chest. Jessica didn't have the technical skills to build anything on her own, so she had attached herself to Sienna, who had money and connections but no original ideas. Together, they were a threat, not because their product was good, but because Sienna's mother was one of the judges. "Margaret Chin is on the panel," Vivian said. "Sienna's mother. If she's biased, There's nothing we can do about it except be better than everyone else. And if we are better and she still picks her daughter, then we appeal to the other 4 judges. Margaret Chin has 1 vote. The other 4 have 4. The room fell silent. Marcus stopped refreshing the UI. Priya looked up from her laptop. Daniel set down his red pen. They were all thinking the same thing. The competition might not be fair, but Vivian had learned, in her previous life, that fair was a luxury for people who had never been cheated. She had been cheated out of a company, a relationship, and a future. She had survived. A biased judge was not going to stop her. Let's focus on what we can control, she said. The pitch, the prototype, the numbers, everything else is noise. The judging session was held in the business school auditorium, a tiered room with a raised stage and a long table at the front where the judges sat behind nameplates. 5 judges. Margaret Chin from Atlas Capital, DR. Raymond Foster from MIT's AI Ethics Lab. Patricia Ng from EdTech Ventures. James Morrison from Morrison Publishing. And Professor Harold Finch from the Westbrook Business School. Vivian's team was scheduled 4th out of 12. They sat in the back row, watching the first 3 presentations, taking careful notes on what the judges asked and how they reacted. The first team pitched a tutoring marketplace. The judges asked about quality control. The team didn't have a good answer. They fumbled through a response about user reviews and rating systems that clearly hadn't been thought through. The second team pitched a classroom management tool. The judges asked about data privacy compliance with FERPA regulations. The team stumbled, looked at each other, and admitted they hadn't considered it. The third team pitched a test preparation platform. The judges asked about market saturation. The team admitted there were already 50 similar products and that their differentiation was better design. These judges are aggressive, Marcus whispered. They're looking for blood. They're looking for people who won't fold under pressure. Vivian corrected, her eyes on the panel. Investors don't care about perfect products. They care about founders who can handle hard questions without crumbling. When their name was called, Vivian walked to the stage with her team. The lights were bright, hot on her face, making the audience beyond the first row disappear into darkness. The judges looked up from their notes as she approached the podium. She took a breath. Then she began. Every semester, 60% of students who fail a course in their first 2 weeks never graduate. They don't fail because they're not smart enough. They fail because the system doesn't adapt to how they learn. She clicked to the first slide. Our platform, Apex Learn, fixes that. The prototype filled the screen, a clean, intuitive interface that Marcus had designed. A diagnostic quiz that adapted in real time. A personalized curriculum map that changed based on every answer. We use adaptive neural networks to identify knowledge gaps in real time. The system learns from every answer, every hesitation, every wrong guess. Within 10 questions, it knows more about a student's strengths and weaknesses than a human tutor could learn in a month of sessions. She walked through the technology, the market size, the business model. She showed them the prototype live, running on her laptop, a student taking a diagnostic quiz, the algorithm adjusting in real time, mapping their knowledge gaps and generating a custom study plan. Priya had optimized the response time to under 2 seconds. Marcus's interface was beautiful, the kind of design that made people want to use it. When she finished, Margaret Chin was the first to speak. Your team is composed entirely of current students. How do you plan to compete with companies that have millions in funding and decades of experience in educational technology? We don't plan to compete with them directly, Vivian said. We plan to be better in a different way. The major players in EdTech build platforms for institutions, schools, districts, universities. Slow sales cycles, high implementation costs, long procurement processes. We build for individual students. Enterprise solutions are slow, expensive, and impersonal. Apex Learn is fast, affordable, and adaptive. By the time the incumbents realize we're a threat, we'll already have the users and the data to defend our position. Your user acquisition strategy. We're targeting university students first. Free tier for the first semester to build trust and gather data. Then a subscription model at $9.99 per month. Students who see results will tell their friends. organic growth, low customer acquisition cost, high retention because the product actually works. Dr. Foster leaned forward. How do you address algorithmic bias in your neural network? Vivian had prepared for this question. Professor Vance had drilled it into her. Every AI startup gets asked about bias, and the ones who stumble don't get funded. Our training data includes students from over 40 demographic categories across income levels, geographic regions, and educational backgrounds. We've tested the algorithm across all categories. The accuracy rate varies by less than 2% across every segment we've tested. I can share our full testing methodology and results with you after this session. Dr. Foster nodded, making a note on his tablet. Patricia Ng asked about their burn rate and how long the trust fund would last. James Morrison asked about their intellectual property protection strategy. Professor Finch asked about the team's commitment level after graduation, whether they would stay together or scatter to different companies. Vivian answered every question without hesitation. When Margaret Chin asked about their go-to-market timeline, Vivian had the answer ready, a phased rollout starting with a beta at 3 universities in January, followed by a full launch in March. When Dr. Foster asked about data privacy, she walked him through their encryption protocol and user consent architecture. When James Morrison asked about their competitive moat, she explained the patent applications they had already filed through the university's technology transfer office. When the Q&A ended, the room was quiet for a moment. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Vivian looked at the judges and saw something in their faces that she hadn't expected. Respect. Even Margaret Chin, who had every reason to dismiss her, was looking at her with a new expression, one that suggested she had taken Vivian seriously despite herself. Thank you, Ms. Shaw, Margaret Chin said, her voice carefully neutral. We'll announce the finalists next week. Vivian and her team walked off the stage. The hallway outside was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead in that particular way that made empty corridors feel like liminal spaces. Daniel let out a long breath. That was brutal. We did well, Vivian said. Better than well. We answered every question. We didn't fold. We showed them we know what we're doing. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. She's still going to pick her daughter. You know that, right? Maybe. Vivian looked back at the auditorium doors. But there are 4 other judges, and I saw them taking notes. Raymond Foster looked impressed. Patricia Ng was nodding through the whole financial section. If we're better than Sienna's team, they'll know it. That evening, Vivian was alone in her dorm room, decompressing from the day, when there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Ethan standing in the hallway, a takeout bag in his hand, his collar turned up against the cold. I brought food, he said. I figured you hadn't eaten. She hadn't. She stepped aside to let him in. How did you know I'd be here? I didn't. But if you weren't, I would have left the bag and texted you. He set the bag on her desk and pulled out 2 containers of steaming noodles. I heard the pitch went well. Who told you? Professor Vance called my father again. She said you were exceptionally composed under pressure. My father said, that's nice. I told him he was an idiot. Vivian laughed. It came out rusty, surprised out of her. You called your father an idiot, not to his face, through a closed door. But he heard me. Ethan opened a container and handed her a pair of chopsticks. Eat. You look like you haven't slept in a week. She sat down and ate. The noodles were hot, salty, the broth rich with ginger and soy, exactly what she needed after a day of holding herself together. Ethan sat across from her, eating from his own container, not saying anything. The silence was comfortable. She realized she couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a meal with someone without feeling the need to defend herself. The finalists are announced next week, she said between bites. I know, if we make it. The second round is in November. We'll need a full working demo by then. You'll have one. Your team is good. Vivian. Marcus knows UX better than most professionals. Priya's optimization work is extraordinary. Daniel has the business instincts of someone twice his age. And if we don't make it, Ethan set down his chopsticks. Then you have a trust fund, a working prototype, and a team that believes in you. You don't need a competition to build a company. Competitions are for people who need validation. You don't need validation. You need capital. And you already have that. She looked at him. The dim light from her desk lamp cast shadows across his face, softening the sharp lines of his jaw. You're always so sure about everything. I'm not sure about everything. His voice was quieter now. I'm sure about you. The words hung in the air between them. Vivian felt her heart skip. A flutter she quickly forced down. You barely know me. I know enough. She looked away, back at her noodles. The steam rose in curls. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but she was afraid of the answer. In her previous life, she had misread every signal, trusted every wrong person. She couldn't afford to make the same mistake again. But when she looked up, Ethan was still watching her. His eyes were steady, patient. He wasn't waiting for an answer. He was just there, present, not demanding anything. Thank you, she said, for the food, for everything. You don't have to thank me, Vivian. Then what do I have to do? He smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it changed his entire face. You just have to keep building. I'll handle the rest. The finalist announcement came on October 12th, a Friday afternoon that felt like the last warm day before winter. Vivian was in Professor Vance's office for their weekly meeting, going over the optimization targets for the prototype, when her phone buzzed with an email notification. Open it, Professor Vance said, not looking up from the document she was reviewing. Vivian opened the email. The words blurred and sharpened as she read them. Congratulations! Your team has been selected as a finalist for the Westbrook Business Plan competition. You will advance to round 2, scheduled for November 16th at 2 p.m. in the Foster Auditorium. Please confirm your participation by October 15th. She stopped reading and looked up. We made it. Professor Vance set down her pen and nodded slowly. I never doubted it. Your pitch was solid. Your prototype was functional. And your team demonstrated real cohesion. Now the real work begins. Vivian read the rest of the email. 10 finalists had been selected out of 47 applicants. The list included the other teams she had watched present, plus a few she hadn't seen. And at number 7, Team Apex Learn, Vivian Shaw. At number 3, Team Ross, Sienna Ross. They had made it too. They made it, Vivian said, her voice flat. Sienna's team. Of course they did. Margaret Chen wouldn't let her daughter be eliminated in the first round. Not when she had the power to prevent it. Professor Vance's voice was matter of fact. But that doesn't matter for the second round. The final round is judged by a completely different panel. External judges with no ties to any of the participants. Your work will speak for itself. Vivian nodded. But a knot of anxiety was forming in her stomach. Cold and tight. Jessica and Sienna had made it through. That meant she would have to face them. In public. On stage. In front of investors and faculty and the entire university. She left Professor Vance's office and walked across the quad. The email open on her phone. The campus was beautiful in October, golden light filtering through the changing leaves. Students lounging on the grass between classes. The distant sound of a guitar from someone's open dorm window. She barely noticed any of it. Viv. She stopped. The voice was familiar in a way that made her skin tighten and her shoulders stiffen. Jessica was walking toward her, a smile on her face. Not the tearful, fragile smile she had worn in the hallway after Vivian refused the tuition. A different smile. Confident. Triumphant. The smile of someone who had found new allies and new power. Congratulations on making finals, Jessica said, stopping a few feet away. She was wearing a cream-colored coat that looked expensive, probably bought with Sienna's money. I knew you would. Did you? Of course. You're brilliant. Viv. You always were. Jessica tilted her head, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. We're going to be competing against each other. Isn't that funny? After everything that happened between us. There's nothing funny about it. Jessica's smile didn't waver. I wanted to apologize for how things ended. I handled it badly. I was scared and I lashed out. I said things I didn't mean. I'm sorry. Vivian looked at her. The same face. The same voice. The same words she had heard 100 times in her previous life. Apologies that meant nothing, followed by betrayals that meant everything. She had learned to recognize the pattern, and she wasn't going to fall for it again. I don't accept your apology, Vivian said. Jessica's smile flickered. Just barely. Viv. I don't accept it because it's not real. You're not sorry. You're gathering information. You want to see how I'm doing, what I'm working on, whether I'm a threat. You want to find my weaknesses so you can exploit them. Vivian stepped closer, her voice dropping. And the answer is, I'm doing fine. I'm working on something you'll never be able to copy. Because you don't have the skills. And I'm a bigger threat than you can imagine. She walked around Jessica and kept going. Behind her, she heard Jessica's voice, low and sharp, stripped of its performative sweetness. You think you're so smart, but you don't know everything. Vivian didn't turn around. Neither do you. She kept walking, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. The confrontation had left her wired, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She needed to move, to do something, to channel the energy into something productive. She ended up at the engineering building without consciously deciding to go there. Ethan was in the computer lab, working on something on his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up when she walked in, took one look at her face, and closed his laptop immediately. What happened? I ran into Jessica. She tried to apologize. The same fake apology she's given me 100 times. And I told her I didn't accept it. Vivian sat down in the chair next to him, her bag sliding off her shoulder. She knows I'm a finalist. She knows I'm building something. She was testing me, trying to see if I would crack. Ethan studied her face. You're shaking. I'm not shaking. I'm vibrating. There's a difference. He almost smiled. Okay. You're vibrating. What do you need? She thought about it. I need to work. I need to make the prototype better. I need to be so good that even with all their money and connections, they can't beat us. Then let's work. They spent the next 4 hours in the computer lab, side by side, coding in silence punctuated by occasional questions and suggestions. Ethan wasn't a programmer, but he understood systems well enough to spot logic errors and suggest optimizations. More importantly, he understood when to talk and when to be quiet, when to offer help and when to just be present. At 9 p.m., Vivian's eyes were burning and her fingers were cramping. She saved her work and closed her laptop. I should get back to my dorm. Maya will worry. I'll walk you. They walked across the dark campus together, their footsteps synchronized on the paved pathways. The air was cold enough that their breath formed small clouds that hung in the air for a moment before dissolving. The campus at night was a different world, quiet, intimate. The buildings reduced to silhouettes against the star-scattered sky. The stars were visible between the campus lights, scattered across the sky like a map of possibilities. The quad was empty, the buildings dark except for a few lighted windows. You know Sienna is going to try something before the second round. Ethan said. I know. She's been asking about you. What you're working on. Who's on your team. Whether you have any weaknesses that can be exploited. And what did you tell her? I told her your only weakness is that you don't drink enough coffee. And I'm working on fixing that. Vivian laughed. It caught her off guard. A real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere she had forgotten existed. Ethan looked at her, surprised. You laughed, he said. I'm capable of laughing. I was starting to wonder. I've known you for a month and I've heard you laugh exactly twice. That's 2 more times than most people. They reached the entrance to her dorm. The building was old, brick covered in ivy that had turned deep red for autumn. A warm light glowed from the lobby window. Vivian stopped at the door and turned to face him. Thank you. For tonight. For not asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. I told you. You don't have to thank me. I know. But I'm going to anyway. They stood there in the darkness, the distance between them shrinking without either of them moving. Vivian could see the rise and fall of his chest, the way his breath caught slightly in the cold air. Vivian. Don't. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't say anything you can't take back. I wasn't going to. Then what were you going to say? He looked at her for a long moment. His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. The touch was light, barely there, but she felt it like a current running through her entire body, electric and warm. I was going to say that you should get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we have a lot of work to do. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press. She stepped back, the cold air rushing in between them, filling the space where his warmth had been. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Vivian. She walked inside without looking back, but she could feel his eyes on her until the door closed behind her with a soft click. She leaned against the door for a moment, her eyes closed, her heart pounding in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the cold walk. In her room, she sat at her desk and stared at her reflection in the dark window. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips were slightly parted. She looked different than she had a month ago, less haunted, more alive. Her heart was still racing. She touched the spot on her temple where his fingers had brushed her skin. She opened her laptop. She couldn't sleep, not with her mind racing, not with the memory of his hand against her cheek still warm on her skin. She opened a new document and started typing. Not code. Notes. Ideas. Plans. She had a competition to win, a company to build, a past to overcome. But for the first time since she had woken up in this life, she didn't feel alone. She felt like she had something worth fighting for that wasn't just revenge. The next morning, Maya found her asleep at her desk, her head resting on her arms, her laptop still open to a half-finished document. Viv, wake up. Vivian groaned and lifted her head. Her neck was stiff, her eyes were dry, and there was a crease from the keyboard on her cheek. What time is it? 7. You fell asleep coding again. No, I fell asleep thinking. Same thing. Maya handed her a cup of coffee. Ethan dropped this off. He said to tell you that the second round doesn't wait for people who oversleep. Vivian took the coffee. It was black. No sugar. The way she liked it. The way he had noticed on their first meeting. She felt something warm spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the caffeine. Also, Maya said, her voice shifting to something more serious. Jessica and Sienna had a meeting with Harrison Cross last night. I heard it from a girl in the business school who works the front desk at the Cross Capitol building. Apparently, Sienna's mother set it up. A private dinner. Just Harrison, Sienna, and Jessica. Vivian's warmth turned to ice. Harrison Cross. According to the source, they were in the private dining room for 2 hours. Sienna's mother was there too, at least for part of it. They're making alliances at the highest level. Maya's voice was grim. If Ethan's father is already backing them, we need to move faster. Vivian stared at her coffee. The steam curled upward. Harrison Cross, Jessica, Sienna. 3 people who wanted to see her fail. Meeting in private to plan her destruction. In her previous life, she would have panicked. She would have called Jessica, crying, asking what she had done wrong. She would have apologized for things that weren't her fault. She would have given in, surrendered her ground, let them walk all over her. But she wasn't that person anymore. She had been forged in the fire of betrayal and had come out harder, sharper, stronger. Harrison Cross could meet with Jessica and Sienna every night for a month. And it wouldn't change the fact that Vivian had something they didn't. The skills, the vision, and the will to build something real. In this life. She picked up her phone and texted Ethan. I know about the dinner. His response came immediately. I know too. My father told me this morning. He said I should reconsider my associations. I told him I'd rather associate with someone building something than with someone buying everything. Vivian stared at the message. Then she typed. What did he say? He hung up. She smiled. It was small and sharp and determined. In her previous life, she had fought alone. In this life, she had Ethan. She had Maya. She had Professor Vance and Marcus and Priya and Daniel. She had a trust fund and a prototype and a plan. She was not alone. And she was ready to fight. She finished her coffee, opened her laptop, and started coding. The second round was a month away. She had a prototype to perfect, a team to lead, and an empire to build. And this time, she was going to win. The first sign that something was wrong came on November 3rd, 13 days before the second round of the competition. Vivian was in the computer lab with Priya, running final optimization tests on the prototype. The screen glowed with lines of code. The neural network processing test data with the quiet efficiency that Priya had optimized over weeks of relentless work. They were ahead of schedule. The demo was stable. The interface was polished. The financial projections were solid. For the first time since she had woken up in September, Vivian felt like she might actually win. Then her phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was tight in a way she had never heard before. "Viv, we have a problem. A serious one. The university's technology transfer office just received a legal notice. Someone has filed a patent claim for an adaptive learning algorithm that matches ours within an 85% similarity threshold. They're claiming prior invention." Vivian's blood went cold. The room seemed to dim around her. The glowing lines of code on her screen suddenly meaningless. Who filed it? Sienna Ross. And the filing date is October 28th. 10 days ago. 10 days ago. Before the finalist announcement. Before Vivian had told anyone outside her immediate team about the specific neural network architecture she was using. But someone had known. Someone had taken her work and filed a patent under a different name, claiming it as their own invention. Jessica. Vivian said. The name came out flat. Dead. Like a stone dropped into still water. She must have gotten access to my code somehow. I checked the server logs for the development environment. Someone logged into your account on October 27th at 3:12 a.m. The login was made using your credentials, your username, your password, your two-factor authentication code. Perfect access. Like they had your phone in their hand. I was asleep at 3 a.m. I went to bed at midnight. Maya was in the room all night. Then someone has your password. And they either stole your phone temporarily or they cloned your SIM card. Either way, they had access to everything in your development environment. Vivian closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. The memory of her past life crashed over her like a wave, the same feeling of helplessness. The same realization that someone she trusted had been stealing from her all along. In her previous life, Jessica had stolen her company through patents and legal maneuvering over the course of years. She had been patient, strategic, surgical. In this life, she was faster, more desperate, more dangerous. How bad is the patent claim? Vivian asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. Bad enough that the tech transfer office is recommending we pause all development until the claim is investigated. They sent a formal notice to Professor Vance's office. If we launch with a product that even arguably infringes on Sienna's patent, we could be sued for millions. The university could be named as a co-defendant for hosting the development environment on their servers. Can they prove we copied? The burden of proof is on them initially. They have to show that the similarity is high enough to suggest copying. But 85% is significant. A judge could grant a temporary injunction based on that alone. If an injunction is granted, we can't launch. We can't even demo the prototype at the competition without risking legal action. Professor Vance could be held personally responsible for allowing us to continue development after notice was given. Vivian gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. Professor Vance. The woman who had believed in her since day one. The woman who had been her grandmother's friend and had waited 2 years for Vivian to ask for help. If the university was threatened, if there was legal exposure, Professor Vance could lose her position. Everything Vivian had built, everything her team had worked for, everything her grandmother had set up across 8 years of planning, it could all be destroyed by a single legal filing. I need to see the patent filing, she said. Can you send it to my email? Already in your inbox. Viv, I'm sorry. I know how much this means to you. I know how hard you've worked. Don't be sorry. Be ready. This isn't over. It's not even close to over. She hung up and opened her email. The patent filing was 9 pages long, dense with technical language and legal diagrams that must have cost thousands in attorney fees to prepare. She read through it once, then again, forcing herself to understand every claim, every assertion. The algorithm described was not identical to hers. There were key differences in the neural network architecture, in the way the diagnostic engine processed student responses, in the feedback loop design. But it was close enough that a court could argue she had derived her work from Sienna's filing, even though Sienna had filed weeks after Vivian had started coding. The timing was what made it dangerous. Vivian had been working on her prototype since September 15th, the day after she woke up in this life. But she hadn't filed any patents. She had been too focused on building, too trusting of the process, too confident that her work would speak for itself. Sienna and Jessica had filed first, which gave them priority in the patent system. Priority meant everything. She sat in the dark computer lab, the patent filing glowing on her screen like an accusation. The walls felt like they were closing in. This was how it had started in her previous life. A patent filing, a legal notice, a slow, grinding destruction of everything she had built. The same pattern, repeating itself despite everything she had done to prevent it. Viv. Priya's voice was soft, hesitant. What are you going to do? Vivian looked at her teammate. Priya's face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. She had spent weeks optimizing the neural network, sacrificing her own coursework to meet Vivian's deadlines. And now it was all at risk because Vivian had trusted the wrong person in a past life. I'm going to fight it, Vivian said. The words came out stronger than she felt. I have time-stamped code from September 15th. I have development logs that show every change I made. I have a working prototype that predates their filing by over a month. I'm going to prove that I built this first. And I'm going to make them withdraw that patent or face a fraud charge. And if the injunction comes before the competition, then I'll find another way. I always do. She didn't sleep that night. She stayed in the computer lab, compiling every piece of evidence she had. Screenshots of her development environment from September, email exchanges with Professor Vance about the research assistant position, which mentioned her algorithm by name. The competition application she had submitted on September 28th, which included a technical description of her approach. The scratch on her laptop caught the fluorescent light as she worked, catching her eye like a signal from her past self, telling her to keep going. At 6 a.m., her phone buzzed. Ethan, I heard about the patent. I've been on the phone all night. Meet me at the library. She packed up her laptop and walked across the quad. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that bled into the gray of the morning clouds. It should have been beautiful. She barely saw it. Her mind was spinning through possibilities, legal strategies, worst-case scenarios. Ethan was at their usual table, 2 coffees waiting, his laptop open to a document she couldn't read from the doorway. He looked as tired as she felt, dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday, his normally immaculate hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled like he had slept in it. He pushed the black coffee toward her as she sat down. I talked to my father, he said. And he knows Sienna filed the patent. He also knows Jessica stole your code. Sienna told him everything, probably bragging about how clever they were, how they had outmaneuvered us. Ethan's jaw was tight, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He doesn't care. He said it's business. He said this is what happens when you don't have family protection. He told me I should learn from your mistakes. Vivian felt the words like a physical blow, but she didn't flinch. Of course he did. That's exactly what someone like him would say. I also talked to a patent attorney, a friend from high school who's now at a firm in the city. I sent him the details of your case, the development logs, the time-stamped files, the competition application. He thinks we have a strong case for prior invention, but it'll take months to resolve in court. Months we don't have if the competition is in 13 days. Vivian stared at her coffee. The steam rose in a thin curl, carrying the familiar scent of roasted beans. So that's it. They win. They found a way to stop me before I could even start. No. Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. They don't win. Because I have something they don't expect. What? Proof that Jessica stole your password. I called a friend in the IT department, someone I've known since freshman year. Someone I trust completely. He pulled the logs from the development server. The login on October 27th at 3:12 a.m. came from an IP address registered to the business school building, room 204. Specifically, the same room where Jessica and Sienna have been meeting. He paused, and the building access logs show Jessica swiped into the business school building at 2:47 a.m. that night. She was there, at 3 a.m., alone in room 204. Vivian looked up. That's not proof she stole my password. It's proof she was in the building. It's circumstantial. Yes. But combined with the fact that your code was in active development weeks before their filing date, it raises enough doubt that a judge would deny an injunction until a full evidentiary hearing. And I have one more thing. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to an email. Sienna's patent attorney sent a draft of the filing to my father's legal department for review before they submitted it. Standard practice, they wanted to make sure the claims were defensible. My father forwarded it to me. By accident. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. By accident. The point is, I have a time-stamped email from October 25th containing a full draft of the patent application. That's 3 days before their official filing date. If your development logs show you were working on this algorithm before October 25th, then you can prove prior development. Vivian felt a spark of hope cut through the despair. It was small, fragile, but it was there. I have development logs from September 15th, the first week I started coding after I made the decision to enter the competition. Then we have a case. A good one. Meet me at Rebecca Torres's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. She's the patent attorney I mentioned. She specializes in defending against fraudulent filings. Bring everything. Your laptop. Your logs. Your competition application. Every scrap of evidence you have. She nodded, her mind already racing through the next steps. Ethan, why are you doing this? Your father is going to find out you're helping me against Sienna. He's going to see it as a direct betrayal. I know. He could cut you off. Disinherit you. Take away every opportunity he's promised you since you were born. Let him. Ethan's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it that Vivian had never heard before. I'd rather have nothing and know who I am than have everything and know who I'm not. I'd rather stand with someone who's building something real than sit with people who are just taking what others have built. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what he had said settling between them like something precious and fragile. Vivian looked at her coffee, then at his face, then back at her coffee. Thank you, she said, for choosing me over your family. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won. I'm not thanking you for winning. I'm thanking you for choosing. For being the one person in this world who sees me and doesn't run away. He looked at her. The gray of his eyes caught the morning light coming through the library windows, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Something deeper than gratitude. Deeper than friendship. I chose the moment I saw you coding at 7 a.m. in a library, wearing a hoodie with frayed strings, building something that was entirely yours. He said, I just didn't know it yet. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with understanding rather than awkwardness. Vivian picked up her coffee and took a long drink. For the first time in 2 days, her hands were steady. We're going to win, she said. I know, and when we do, I'm going to build the best edtech company this country has ever seen. I know that too. She looked at him. How do you know? He smiled. Because I've seen you code. I've seen you handle a crisis. I've seen you refuse to break when anyone else would have shattered. You're the strongest person I know. The meeting with the patent attorney went better than Vivian had dared to hope. And it changed something fundamental inside her. For the first time since she had woken up in September, she felt like she had the upper hand. Rebecca Torres was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. Her office lined with framed diplomas and awards and a single photograph of her with 2 children. She reviewed the evidence for 2 hours, asking precise questions about dates and timestamps and development processes. She examined Vivian's laptop, noted the scratch on the corner, and asked about its significance. It's been with me since freshman year, Vivian said. I dropped it the first week of orientation. You can see the crack pattern. It's distinctive enough that I can identify this specific machine even without the serial number. Rebecca nodded, making a note on her legal pad. That's the kind of detail that convinces judges. A generic story about coding in September is one thing. A physical artifact that ties your work to a specific time and place is another entirely. Juries love physical evidence. At the end of the 2 hours, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands on the desk. Ms. Shaw, I've been practicing intellectual property law for 15 years. In that time, I've seen exactly 3 cases where someone filed a patent based on stolen code and managed to defend it successfully. Your case is not going to be one of them. The evidence is too clear. The timeline too tight. The physical artifacts too distinctive. They filed a patent on a product they don't have, using code they can't produce. You have the product, the code, and the timeline. Vivian let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The tension that had been coiled in her chest for 2 days began to loosen. Slowly, like a knot being pulled apart strand by strand. So we can fight the injunction. We can do better than fight it. We can file a counter notice that puts the entire validity of their patent into question. If our evidence is as solid as it appears, and I believe it is, we can force them to withdraw voluntarily or face a countersuit for fraudulent filing. That's not a position any reputable attorney will allow their client to remain in. Fraudulent patent claims can result in disbarment for the attorneys involved. Rebecca slid a document across the desk. I've prepared an affidavit for you to sign. It states that you began development of your algorithm on September 15th, that you have time-stamped evidence to prove it, and that you have physical evidence tying your work to that timeline. Vivian took the document and read every word carefully before signing. The scratch on her laptop caught the light as she wrote her name on the signature line. I'll file this tomorrow morning. By the end of the week, Sienna Ross will either withdraw her patent claim or face a hearing where we present our evidence. Rebecca smiled. A thin, professional expression. She doesn't have the code to back up her claim. She has a legal filing, not a product. Those are very different things in a court of law. Vivian walked out of the attorney's office feeling lighter than she had in days. The autumn sun was warm on her face. The streets of the city busy with afternoon traffic. People rushed past her with briefcases and coffee cups, oblivious to the battle she had just won. Ethan was waiting for her in the lobby, his laptop open on his knee, a coffee cup balanced on the arm of his chair. He looked up when she walked in. How did it go? We're filing a counter notice. She'll have to withdraw or face a fraud hearing. Rebecca thinks she'll fold within a week. Her attorney won't want to risk disbarment over a fraudulent filing. Ethan closed his laptop and stood up. Good. Now we focus on the competition. We have 11 days. Ethan, about your father. He was quiet for a moment, his expression shuddering. Then he said, I told him I was helping you. I didn't tell him about the attorney or the counter notice, but I told him I was on your side in the competition. And, what did he say? He said if I walked into that competition with you, I shouldn't bother coming home. He said I would be dead to him, that he would rewrite his will, that he would make sure every door in the business world was closed to me. Ethan's voice was flat, controlled, like he was reporting facts that had happened to someone else. I told him I'd already made my choice. Vivian felt a weight settle in her chest, heavy and warm and painful all at once. He disowned you. Just like that. He's trying. He sent a letter to the bank freezing my access to the family accounts. He called the business school dean and tried to have my enrollment status changed. The dean told him he couldn't do that without my consent or a documented academic violation. Ethan met her eyes. It doesn't matter. Vivian. I was never going to be the person he wanted me to be. I just didn't realize it until I met you. They stood in the lobby of the law firm, the afternoon light streaming through the glass doors and casting long shadows across the marble floor. The receptionist was on the phone, her voice a low murmur in the background. Vivian looked at Ethan, the sharp line of his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes that he was trying to hide beneath a calm expression, the set of his shoulders that was trying to look strong but was holding too much weight. You gave up everything for me, she said. I gave up nothing that was mine. He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. A father's approval that was conditional on me being someone I'm not. A future that was chosen for me before I was born. Money I didn't earn and didn't want. I gained something I never had before. What? A choice. The ability to decide who I am and who I want to be with. That's worth more than any inheritance, any trust fund, any corner office. The air between them was charged. Electric. Vivian could feel her heart beating in her throat, in her fingertips, in every part of her body. She had been here before, standing close to someone who said all the right things. But Ethan had done more than say words. He had acted. He had risked everything. And he was still standing here, looking at her like she was worth it. I don't know how to do this, she said, Trust someone. Again. I know. I've been wrong before. About people. About who they really are. I trusted someone who destroyed me. I know. I don't want to be wrong about you. His hand found hers. His fingers were warm, steady, and he didn't rush. He just held her hand like he had all the time in the world. Like there was nowhere else he needed to be. Nothing more important than this moment. You won't be, he said, because I'm not going anywhere. I've spent my whole life around people who wanted something from me. You're the first person who just wanted me to show up, to be present, to be real. So I'm going to keep showing up, every day, until you believe it. She looked at him, the gray of his eyes, the slight furrow of his brow, the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. Me too. And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was asking permission. She gave it, leaning into him, her free hand finding the collar of his jacket and gripping the fabric tightly. The kiss deepened, and she felt something break open inside her, a wall she had built around her heart, brick by brick, stone by stone. Since the moment she had woken up in this life, the wall crumbled, and she was left exposed and raw and freer than she had felt in years. When they pulled apart, her cheeks were wet. She hadn't realized she was crying. I'm sorry, she said, wiping at her face with the back of her hand. I don't know why I'm crying. This is supposed to be a happy moment. Don't apologize. His thumb brushed away a tear, gentle and unhurried. You've been holding everything together for 2 months. You've been fighting alone in your head, carrying the weight of your past and fighting for your future at the same time. You're allowed to fall apart. You're allowed to feel. I'm not falling apart. I'm just, what? Not alone anymore. He kissed her again, softer this time, like he was sealing a promise. When he pulled back, he was smiling. It was a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and softened the sharp edges of his face, made him look younger, lighter. You were never alone, Vivian. You just forgot. The next week was a blur of preparation. The patent counter notice was filed on Tuesday. Sienna's legal team requested an extension on Wednesday, which Rebecca interpreted as a clear sign that they were nervous. The competition was 7 days away, and Vivian's team was working around the clock to perfect the prototype. But something had changed in Vivian. The edges of her world, which had been sharp and cold since she had woken up in September, had softened. She still carried the scars of her past life. She still felt the echo of the hospital ceiling when she closed her eyes at night, still heard the sound of footsteps walking away from her room. But she also carried something new, hope, and love. She was in the library with Ethan, reviewing the final version of her pitch, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won. You haven't. The competition is just the beginning. JR. She showed it to Ethan without saying anything. Jessica, he said. She's panicking. The counter notice shook them. They didn't expect you to fight back. Or she's planning something bigger. Something we can't predict. Either way, we're ready. We have the evidence. We have the prototype. We have the team. He took her hand under the table. And we have each other. Vivian looked at the message. The letters J.R. Jessica Ross. Had she already taken Sienna's last name in her mind? Was she already planning her next life? The one where she emerged victorious. In her previous life, Jessica had destroyed Vivian with a smile. In this life, Jessica was failing, and she knew it. Desperate people did desperate things. Ethan, what if she does something at the competition? Something we can't predict. I've already thought about that. I'll be in the front row. So will Maya, and Professor Vance, and your entire team. If anything happens, you won't be alone. That's not a plan. That's a hope. It's the best I have. He squeezed her hand. We've come this far. We've beaten her at every turn. She's desperate now. And desperate people make mistakes. We just have to be ready to catch her when she does. She looked at their joint hands. The same hands that had coded the prototype, signed the trust documents, held each other in a law firm lobby. No, she said, we're not just going to catch her. We're going to win. On the morning of November 16th, Vivian woke up at 5 a.m. The water stain on the ceiling was still there. A faded brown map of a world she had once thought was her ceiling. She showered, dressed in her best suit, navy blue, tailored to fit, bought with her trust fund money, and stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at her was not the same woman who had woken up in September. That woman had been broken, afraid, carrying the weight of a life she had already lost. Her eyes had been hollow, her shoulders hunched, her future a wasteland of caution and fear. This woman was different. Her eyes were clear, her shoulders were straight. She had built something from nothing. She had found allies who believed in her. She had let herself love again, despite every reason not to. Today is the day, she said to her reflection. Today, everything changes. She picked up her laptop, the scratch on the corner catching the light, and walked out of her dorm room into the November morning. The air was cold and clean, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the distant hint of snow. Students were starting to stir, lights flickering on in windows across the quad. In a few hours, everything would change. Vivian walked toward the student center, where her team was meeting for a final rehearsal. Her phone buzzed. Ethan, I'll be in the front row. Third seat from the left. You won't be able to see me in the lights, but I'll be there. She smiled and typed back. I'll know. She had been broken by betrayal and rebuilt herself from the fragments. She had found love in the most unexpected place. And today, she was going to win. The Foster Auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled, students in the first 10 rows, faculty behind them, investors and journalists and university administrators filling the balcony. The air hummed with the particular tension of a room where something important was about to happen. 500 people waiting to see which team would walk away with $50,000 in seed funding and the credibility to launch a real company. Vivian stood backstage, her laptop in her hands, the scratch on the corner catching the stage lights. She could hear the murmur of the crowd, the occasional burst of laughter, the shuffle of programs as people settled into their seats. Her team was behind her, Marcus, Priya, Daniel, each of them carrying the same tension in their shoulders. The same quiet determination. Report from the audience, Maya said, appearing from the wings. She had been planted in the crowd to watch for any sign of Jessica or Sienna's last-minute scheme. Jessica and Sienna are in the 4th row. Jessica looks nervous. Sienna looks confident. Harrison Cross is in the balcony, 3rd row from the back. And he's been watching the stage since he sat down. Harrison Cross is here, Daniel asked, his voice tight. Wouldn't miss it. His son's reputation is on the line, and he wants to see whether Vivian succeeds or fails. Maya looked at Vivian. He's not the only one. Margaret Chen is on the judging panel. Patricia Ng from EdTech Ventures is in the 3rd row. There are reporters from 3 different tech publications in the back. This is the biggest audience you'll ever have. Vivian nodded. The stakes couldn't be higher, but she had prepared for this. She had practiced the pitch 100 times. She knew the technology better than anyone in this building, and she had the evidence to back up every claim she would make. The first 2 teams presented. The first was a marketplace for tutoring services, clean concept, weak technology. The team stumbled when asked about quality control. The second was a classroom management tool, good design, questionable market size. The presenter's voice wavered during Candé. Vivian barely heard them. She was in a bubble of focus, her mind running through the pitch. Every word, every slide, every transition. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, hot, blinding. She couldn't see the audience beyond the 1st row, but she knew Ethan was there, 3rd seat from the left, just like he had promised. She didn't slow down. She walked toward the center of the stage, her heels clicking on the polished wood, and took her position at the podium. The laptop with the scratched corner was open in front of her, connected to the projector. She looked out at the darkened auditorium. The lights were so bright she could barely see past the 1st row, but she knew exactly where everyone was. Ethan, 3rd seat from the left, exactly where he had promised. Maya, 2 rows behind him, her phone ready to record. Professor Vance, on the aisle, her expression unreadable. Harrison Cross, watching from the balcony like a hawk observing prey. Margaret Chen, sitting on the judging panel with her pen poised over her notes, her face professionally neutral. Every semester, 60% of students who fail a course in their first 2 weeks never graduate. She began. Her voice carried through the room, clear and steady, amplified by the acoustics of the auditorium. They don't fail because they're not smart enough. They fail because the system doesn't adapt to how they learn. A lecture covers the same material at the same pace for 30 students. And if you fall behind in the first week, you spend the rest of the semester trying to catch up. Most students never do. She clicked to the first slide. Her prototype filled the screen, a clean, intuitive interface with warm colors and simple navigation. Apex Learn fixes that. Our platform uses adaptive neural networks to identify knowledge gaps in real time. The system learns from every answer, every hesitation, every wrong guess. Within 10 diagnostic questions, it knows more about a student's strengths and weaknesses than a human tutor could learn in a month of sessions. It then generates a personalized curriculum that adapts as the student progresses, focusing on their weak areas and reinforcing their strengths. She walked them through the technology, the market research, the financial projections. She showed the live demo. A volunteer from the audience answered 10 questions on the screen, and the audience watched in real time as the algorithm mapped her knowledge gaps and generated a custom study plan. The volunteer, a first-year biology student, looked genuinely surprised when she saw how accurately the system had identified her areas of weakness. The market for adaptive learning tools is projected to reach $8 billion by 2025. Vivian continued. Current solutions are expensive, slow, and designed for institutions, not individual students. Apex Learn is fast, affordable, and accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Free tier for the first semester, then a subscription at $9.99 per month. Students who see results will tell their friends. Organic growth, low acquisition cost, high retention because the product actually works. She talked about her team, Marcus's UX expertise, Priya's neural network optimization, Daniel's business strategy. She talked about Professor Vance's mentorship and the research grant that would support their next phase of development. She talked about the trust fund her grandmother had left her, and how it had allowed her to hire an attorney and protect her intellectual property. My grandmother died 8 years ago, Vivian said, her voice steady, but before she died, she set up a trust fund for me. She left a letter saying she believed in me. That letter has kept me going through the hardest moments of this journey. She paused. I mention this because I want every student in this room to know. You don't need a famous last name or a family fortune to build something that matters. You need an idea, the willingness to work for it, and the courage to protect it when someone tries to take it from you. And then she addressed the elephant in the room. But I wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for one more thing. She paused, letting the silence build. Someone tried to steal this idea. They filed a patent claim for this technology, claiming they had developed it first. The room went quiet. She could feel the shift in the air, curiosity, confusion, anticipation. That patent claim was based on code that was stolen from my development environment. The theft occurred on October 27th, at 3:12 a.m. The login was made from the business school building, room 204, using my credentials that were accessed without my knowledge or consent. She clicked to a new slide. A timeline appeared, her development logs from September 15th, the unauthorized login on October 27th, the patent filing on October 28th. The gap between them was clear and undeniable. I have time-stamped code from September 15th. I have development logs showing every change I made, every line I wrote. I have building access records showing who was in room 204 at 3 a.m. on October 27th. I have an affidavit from my attorney confirming the validity of my claims. And I have a letter from the patent holder's legal team, dated yesterday, withdrawing the patent claim. She held up her laptop, turning it so the audience could see the corner with the distinctive scratch. This laptop has been with me since the first week of freshman year. The scratch on the corner is from the day I dropped it running to class. Every line of code for Apex Learn was written on this machine. Every timestamp in my development logs traces back to this specific computer. The patent that was filed against me claims technology that was never developed on any machine connected to the people who filed it. She set the laptop back down slowly, deliberately. I'm saying this not to create drama, but because this competition is supposed to be about who has the best idea, not who has the best connections. I believe that if you're going to build something, you should build it yourself. The murmuring started slowly, then grew. People were turning in their seats, looking at Sienna, at Jessica, at the judging panel. Margaret Chen's face was a mask of professional composure, but Vivian could see the tightness around her jaw, the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted her glasses. The patent claim has been withdrawn because it was fraudulent. The technology belongs to me and my team. She clicked to her final slide. The Apex Learn logo, clean and simple, with her team's names beneath it. Thank you for listening. The applause started slowly, then swelled. By the time she walked off the stage, it was a roar that followed her through the wings and into the backstage area, where she could still hear it echoing through the auditorium walls. Backstage, her team surrounded her. Daniel grabbed her arm, his face flushed with adrenaline. That was incredible. The way you called them out in front of everyone, the laptop, the scratch, the timeline. You didn't just win the pitch. You won the narrative. They deserve to be called out, Vivian said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. They've been trying to take credit for my work for months. Today, they had to face the consequences in front of 500 people. Daniel's face was grim. Sienna's mother is on the judging panel. She's not going to forget this. I know. Let's see if she has the integrity to vote against her own daughter when the evidence is clear and the entire room is watching. You're playing with fire. I'm playing to win. The final team presented. Then the judges deliberated. The wait was excruciating, 45 minutes that felt like an eternity. Vivian sat with her team in the green room. None of them speaking. All of them staring at their phones. Priya was pacing, her footsteps a steady rhythm on the carpet. Marcus was refreshing his email every 30 seconds. Daniel sat very still, his eyes closed, his breathing measured. Finally, a stagehand appeared. They're ready. Will the finalists please come to the stage? They walked out together. The other finalists were already there, Sienna and Jessica on the far end of the stage, their faces carefully neutral. Sienna was standing stiffly, her hands clasped in front of her, her chin held high. Jessica looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, her makeup smudged, her shoulders hunched. The head judge stepped to the microphone. After careful deliberation, we are pleased to announce the winner of the Westbrook Business Plan competition. Vivian held her breath. The winner is Apex Learn, Vivian Shaw and her team. The room erupted. Vivian felt hands on her shoulders, arms around her, heard her team shouting in her ear. She stood frozen for a moment, the words not quite landing. Then she looked out at the audience and found Ethan in the third row. He was standing, clapping, a smile on his face that she had never seen before. Pure, unfiltered joy. She walked to the center of the stage to accept the check. $50,000. The paper was crisp in her hands. She held it up, and the cameras flashed. But as she turned to leave the stage, she caught a glimpse of Jessica. Her former best friend was staring at her with an expression Vivian had never seen before. Not anger, not jealousy, something else. Something that looked like understanding. The dawning realization of everything she had lost, the friendship she had destroyed, the trust she had betrayed, the future she could have had. Sienna was already walking away from Jessica, her heels clicking sharply on the stage floor, her face a mask of cold fury. The alliance was over. The plan had failed. Jessica was standing alone in the middle of the stage, the spotlight catching the tears running down her face. Vivian looked at her former best friend. Part of her expected to feel triumph, but what she felt was something quieter. Completion. The story that had started with a text message in September had reached its ending. She had not won a victory over Jessica. She had simply moved on to a life where Jessica no longer mattered. She walked off the stage without looking back. The after-party was held in the business school atrium, a glass-walled space filled with string lights and catered hors d'oeuvres and the buzz of excited conversation. Vivian stood in the middle of it, surrounded by her team, by Professor Vance, by students she had never met who wanted to congratulate her. She smiled. She shook hands. She accepted praise with a grace she hadn't known she possessed. But her eyes kept drifting to the entrance, looking for one person. He arrived 20 minutes after the party started, and the crowd seemed to part around him as he walked in. He was wearing the same navy sweater he had worn the day they met in the library. Vivian recognized it immediately. The soft fabric, the way it fit his shoulders. He walked through the crowd like he was looking for something specific, his eyes scanning every face. And when his gaze found hers, he didn't look away. "Congratulations," Ethan said when he reached her. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. "Thank you. For everything. I didn't do anything. You did this. You and your team. I just watched. You did everything." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You believed in me before you had any reason to. You warned me about the rumors. You introduced me to Marcus and Priya and Daniel. You found the patent attorney. You chose me over your family. You gave me the courage to keep fighting when I wanted to give up. I gave you nothing you didn't already have. Vivian, the courage was yours. I just reminded you it was there. You gave me hope." She looked into his eyes. "That's not nothing. That's everything." He looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes warm in the string light. The party continued around them, laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses, but they were in their own world, separated from the noise by a bubble of silence. "I've been afraid my whole life," he said quietly. "Afraid of disappointing my father. Afraid of making the wrong choice. Afraid of ending up like him, successful on paper, empty inside." He paused. "But when I'm with you, I'm not afraid. You make me want to be brave. You are brave. You chose me over your inheritance. That wasn't bravery. That was the easiest decision I've ever made." Then he took her hand gently and led her away from the crowd, to a quiet corner of the atrium where the string lights cast soft shadows and the party seemed far away. "What happens now?" he asked. "I have a company to build. Apex Learn has $50,000 in seed funding and an office lease starting next week. My team is ready to go full-time after finals. Professor Vance has already connected me with 3 potential beta testers for the spring semester. I know that. I mean, what happens with us?" Vivian looked at him. The gray of his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way he was holding her hand like it was something precious and fragile. She had been afraid of this question for weeks. But now, standing in the aftermath of victory, the fear had burned away. "I don't know what happens," she said, "but I know what I want." "What do you want?" "You." The word came out before she could stop it, and she didn't want to stop it. "I want you. Not as a business partner. Not as a mentor or a coach or someone I call for advice. I want you as the person I come home to, the person I tell everything to, the person who sees me at my worst and stays anyway." He didn't answer with words. He pulled her close and kissed her, there in the corner of the atrium, under the string lights, with the sound of the party and the clinking of glasses fading into the background. His hand found the curve of her jaw, tilting her face up, and she melted into him. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. It was the real smile, the one that reached his eyes and made him look like a different person. "I think I've wanted that since the moment you told me to mind your own business in the library." "I never told you to mind your own business. You thought it. I could see it in your eyes. You were thinking, who is this arrogant business student who thinks he can read my code? And I was thinking, who is this girl who doesn't know who I am and doesn't care?" She laughed. It was real and full and felt like freedom. "I knew who you were. I just didn't care. That's what made you different. That's what made me stay." 3 months later, on a cold February morning, Vivian stood in the doorway of her new office. It was small, just a room with 2 windows that faced a brick wall, a whiteboard covered in marker diagrams in multiple colors, and a simple wooden desk. But it was hers. The lease was in her name, signed with trust fund money. The company was incorporated under her name, Apex Learn Inc. Everything in it had been built by her team. She walked to the desk and set down her laptop. The scratch on the corner caught the light from the window, and she ran her thumb over the familiar groove. "You've been with me through 2 lives," she said quietly. "Let's make this one count." There was a knock at the door. She turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway. a cardboard tray with 2 coffees in his hand, his collar turned up against the cold February air. "First day of the rest of your life," he said. "I brought coffee. You remembered." "I always remember." He set the coffee on her desk and looked around the office, taking in the bare walls and the whiteboard covered in code snippets. "It's perfect. It's small. The ceiling leaks when it rains. The heat doesn't work on weekends. It's yours." She walked over to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his chest. He held her, his chin resting on the top of her head, his arms wrapped around her like he was protecting her from the world. "I love you," she said. It was the first time she had said it out loud. She had thought it 100 times, every time he brought her coffee, every time he stayed late in the library to help her practice her pitch, every time he held her hand in the dark. But saying it was different. The words felt foreign on her tongue. "But right. True. I love you too," he said. His voice was rough, like he had been holding the words in as long as she had. "I think I loved you the moment you told me to mind your own business." "I never said that." "You thought it." She laughed against his chest. "I didn't think it. I was thinking, this is the most interesting person I've met in years." And I was terrified. Of what? Of feeling something real. Of trusting someone again. Of letting you in and watching you leave. She looked up at him. "But you didn't leave. You stayed. I told you. I'm not going anywhere." Later that afternoon, Vivian sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. The screen glowed to life, and she looked at the empty coding environment. This was where she would build the next version of Apex Learn. Not in a dorm room with a scratched laptop and a water-stained ceiling. In an office. Her office. Before she started coding, she pulled up the final document from her grandmother's trust, the letter Eleanor Sterling had written 8 years ago. She had read it a dozen times since Professor Vance had given it to her, but she read it again now, letting the words settle into her bones. "Dear Vivian," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you found your way to the trust. I knew you would. You were always resourceful, even as a child. You have your mother's intelligence and your father's determination. But what makes you special is something that belongs only to you. The ability to see the world as it could be, not just as it is. I'm sorry I won't be there to see what you become, but I've made arrangements to make sure you have the resources you need. The trust is not a gift, it's an investment in the person I know you will become. Trust yourself, Vivian. The world will try to break you. People will disappoint you. But you have something inside you that cannot be broken. Hold on to it. And when you find someone who sees you as you truly are, not as who they want you to be, but as who you actually are, hold on to them too. That kind of love is rare. It is worth fighting for. I love you. I am proud of you. Grandma Eleanor. Vivian folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. Then she opened her coding environment and began to work. The first lines of code appeared on the screen. She was building something new, something better, something that belonged entirely to her. In her previous life, she had built a company for someone else. She had given her trust to people who didn't deserve it. She had loved people who used her love against her. In this life, she had learned. She had grown. She had built something with her own hands. She had found people who were worth trusting. Maya, her first and truest friend in both lives. Professor Vance, her mentor and her grandmother's ally. Marcus, Priya, and Daniel, her team. And Ethan, the man who had seen her at her most guarded and had stayed anyway. She looked out the window. The city was spread out in the gray February light, a landscape of possibilities. Somewhere out there, Jessica was facing the consequences of her choices, expelled from the university after the patent fraud investigation, her academic career in ruins. Sienna was explaining to her mother's business partners why a fraudulent patent claim had been filed under her name. Harrison Cross was learning that his son had chosen a different path, and that the path had led to a company that was already generating more investor interest than any portfolio company he had ever backed. And Vivian Shaw was just getting started. She rolled up her sleeves, positioned her fingers over the keyboard, and began to code. The prototype needed to be refined. The beta test was scheduled for March. The full launch was planned for September, 1 year after she had woken up in a dorm room with $400 and a second chance. The story of Apex Learn was just beginning. But the story of Vivian Shaw, the woman who had died and come back, who had been broken and rebuilt herself piece by piece, who had found love and trust in a future she had never imagined, that story had reached its happy ending. She saved her work, closed her laptop, and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that bled into the gray clouds. The city lights were beginning to flicker on, one by one. Behind her, her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Dinner at 7. My place. I'm cooking. Don't be late. She smiled. I'll be there. She picked up her laptop and walked out of her office, turning off the light behind her. The lease said she could stay as late as she wanted, but she had somewhere to be. In her previous life, she had ended alone in a hospital room, watching her phone stay silent as the footsteps of the people who had betrayed her faded down the hallway. In this life, she had everything. A company she had built from nothing, a team that believed in her, a future that belonged to her, and a man who was waiting for her with dinner. She walked out into the February evening, the cold air sharp on her face, and she smiled. This life was hers, and she was never letting it go. If this story kept you listening until the end, subscribe to Warm Era. The next romantic revenge story is already waiting.